For September 20th, 2021. Ashley, could you call the roll?
Fritz,
Wow. Here.
Dora,
Here.
Cummins,
Here.
Scott,
Here.
Manetza.
Here,
Hey, it took me by surprise, being first.
but you are here.
That's the first time.
All right, our first order of business for the work session is a review of the Infrastructure Priority Review Committee. Yeah, I'm with Derek Gatos.
Good evening, Your Honor, council members. Derek Gatos, Public Works Director for the city. So I'm here tonight to talk to you about one of the council goals that you set last November that we actually got started on here in March, where a couple of council members and some staff and some city residents formed a committee to review our infrastructure priorities. So I'll go through that tonight with you. As I said, it's one of our goals. We had 6 staff members, the city engineer, only 2 council members, and a couple residents at large. And I got lucky in recruiting an old DPW director who lives in the city and understands infrastructure, and he helped us out a lot. Mark Vermerkamos, who recently retired from the township. And so I think we had a great committee, 11 people that were well vested in our infrastructure in the city. What do we do? Well, we had 4 virtual meetings back in April through June. Really was, the original intent we thought was to just review our existing $40 to $50 million capital improvement plan, that isn't necessarily prioritized in what projects we're going to do next, just they're identified as what we need to do. So that was our initial, I guess, push or mindset with this committee. We reviewed the current road system, infrastructure failure locations, and ongoing maintenance programs. The committee's general direction, because it was literally a lot of great minds in one room or one Zoom at a time, that had a lot of great input. As all this information that we were trying to review, how do we set a priority? It came up that, well, city staff are the first and foremost most intimate with all of these needs, if you will. So they should be help identify these priorities in which order. However, one thing that came out of it that I don't think we're necessarily intending was really should be a scientific method. It should be like, well, how bad is this water main? Not just how does it that it needs to be replaced, or how bad is the sewer, or what techniques do we utilize to review that sewer system or storm sewer system or road system. So how do we do a scientific method? And there's a new way of thinking and doing things. It's been coming out over the last probably 10 to 20 years, but engineering a priority solution. So asset management is the term that is used for this plan, and it takes in the holistic viewpoint of what all needs to be done and when, and try to use terms like criticality. How critical is this infrastructure? So maybe on my street the water main needs to be replaced, but the one in front of the hospital is a little more important. We need the hospital running, or maybe it's a major road, or maybe it's a large main or a small main. Either way, a looping main, let's say, is very critical to the system. So it takes all of those dynamics into play. But it's a living document. This isn't just we do one snapshot at a time. We put all those numbers in, and every year you would review it for, did the hospital move last year? Is it now not critical? Or maybe something we had 4 sewer failures in this one block, over 1 year. Like it's just critically failing. So it'll change those priorities as the conditions of our system change. I won't go over all the details of asset management. We can do another council work session, or I can forward you information on that plan. But either way, the committee's proposal was to utilize a qualified engineer firm for probably a 2 to 4 year study is what's going to take to actually do this plan with heavy city staff involved. We're the ones that have to feed them the information. They'll format the actual plan document and help rate each aspect of that plan. water system, sewer system, storm sewer, streets, major and local, all those will be included in that asset management plan. We can, and this is just the start, because at some point we're going to have either more infrastructure that we can include in asset management, let's say our facilities or other utilities like the city's fiber system. At some point, that'll need to be replaced, and at what location and at what time. But anyways, the develop a strategy. And develop a strategy to engage the public. That was another key one that one of our members brought up, was how do we communicate that to the public? We did a great job with the infrastructure millage a couple years ago, and the city residents said, yep, let's long-term start funding these. We won't get the full net effect of that until 2035, but at least we have a plan to start funding. But how do we engage the public? And we did a great job that time. How do we continue that without just beating the public up with all of this information that we could do it strategically? So this is actually this link here. I can forward to you in an email, but asset management hasn't been around for forever. Canada, our neighboring partner to the north, is one of the leaders in the world, actually, where they talk about, hey, we've got all this infrastructure. How do we afford it long term? We're talking from actual building to maintenance to rehabilitation to replacement. Okay, and so this quick video, this link is really cool, and it talks a lot. It's a little Canadian, if you will, in that regards, but actually it just fits even with the infrastructure we have, and hits a lot of great topics. Actually, this video was shared at a Michigan infrastructure priority committee. I'm trying to think of the actual committee where they were pushing asset management throughout our community and our state. How do we take that next big step? So that's where I actually found it in one of the seminars that I was in and participated. So funding, how do we pay for this? The total cost is about $338,000. And we talked about a formula, if you will, using 1/3 each for each system. We'll split the major and local streets by 1/3, so cut that in half. We thought that was a pretty fair plan. And then we said, how does this actually come to fruition? What would be a likely draw schedule or cost? We talked about strategically planning and starting this in January 2022. In order to talk to you, we'll have to make a budget amendment for this current fiscal year of about $60,000 total, $20,000 each water, sewer, and $10,000 for each major and local streets. But also commit to the next 2 fiscal year cycles to finish the program, the plan. City assets. I actually borrowed this from an asset management PowerPoint that I did about a year ago on what really is this. What do we manage? Well, these are projects that I've done since I've been here, and we look at all of the costs. And really, if you look at asset management holistically in infrastructure, the cost of building it is only about a quarter. So when we talk about Fulton Phase 2 next year, $1.6 million. Really, the maintenance on that roadway, and the infrastructure is 4 times that over the life cycle of each asset. So we look at big dollars, and it's even bigger dollars to say, hey, we're gonna continue to manage this asset for our residents and visitors. But there's some pretty big projects on there. Replacement Harbor Drive, citywide sewer line in the catwalk in 2019. If we triple or quadruple that number, that's $12 million in the life cycle of those assets, and that's just a fraction of what we own and what we have to maintain. So final community recommendations was to support a fully functioning asset management plan. When I say that, this is something we're going to invest in annually, mostly city staff. We don't anticipate our engineer being involved. They might at some point if we need them, but city staff will maintain this living document. Amend the current fiscal year to provide funding for the commencement of it, and commit funds in the next 2 fiscal years, and then utilize that as our next infrastructure investments. Now, I'll say that as a caveat, just if we decide that, let's say, Colfax or Dispelder, some other street on these, in town is next in line for rehabilitation or replacement. Some of that stuff has to be prioritized by our funding sources as well. So just because it's number one on the list, if we have some funding sources come across, availability, that maybe we're going to do project number 4, because those funds, fit with project 4, but not with 1, 2, or 3. So I say that with some caveats. It's not just a play by number. We're doing 1 and then 2, then 3. It's like if we just had unlimited funds, this is the order, or funds that didn't matter where we placed it. So they're going to talk in a minute about the EDA funding. The Marina and some of those projects aren't necessarily on the highest of our lists. They're on our list, and we need to get them done. But if we have funding for that and not something else, we should utilize those funding sources. But anyways, lastly, can develop a communication plan to keep residents informed of the plan and the progress. And so we're still kind of developing that internally, and we'll actually plan on reconvening the committee in the next few months to see what that really looks like as we start marching forward. One thing that I didn't put in the slide, and I realize this now, I want to mention, what do we do between now and 2024, right? We're probably going to have some funds, not a whole lot. Federal, state, grant funds, what do we do with those? We have a short list, pretty much the top 3 or 4 projects that are in our capital plan that we can attack over the next couple of years. And we're not going to get all, let's say, top 5 done. We'll probably pick and choose. But in the meantime, we have some real high priority projects that we need to try and get funded and complete. And the number one is Fulton Street on the east or west side of the highway, from 1st to 7th, is in really, really bad shape. Every part of that infrastructure is well exceeded its life expectancy. We just invested a bunch of money and some time on the east side with 2 phases. Second phase coming up next spring. But we also have projects that if we find some funding for, let's say, Harbor from Franklin down to Howard, or another section that in our water system that really needs to be looped with a bigger main is Harbor from Prospect to Grand. That road is also crumbling as well. We just did a big patch on it this spring just because we know it's not going to be next year or the year after. 7th Street, we have a vision plan for that. So if there's monies available through the feds or the state where they can help fund that project, that's from US 31 all the way down to Clinton. So there are some projects. Those are projects that we have on our plate. However, if we get funding or availability funding on some grant opportunities, we might go ahead and tackle maybe a small section of Washington on the east side, or Robbins Road. We reconstructed half of it, not the other half. So we'll strategically try and get through the next couple of years while this plan is being developed, and then take off from there. That's all I have for you tonight. Do you have any questions for me?
Who's got questions for Derek?
Derek, I'm struggling with the value of this ultimately, just based on the cost of it. I mean, it sounds good when you kind of look at the theory of it, but it's also $338,000 that we're paying, an outside, our engineer of record here, Adam DeMarge, to kind of help us put it together. As you said, our staff are going to be doing a lot of labor here, but the way you finished there, where you said we're going to be strategic, it sounds like you have a pretty good grasp on, where we're at any given time. I get that there's maybe some things that come up, and you kind of mentioned that during your presentation, that, staff is most knowledgeable as the conditions, and that, you kind of evaluate things, regularly. You look at the criticality. One year you might all of a sudden have a bunch of failures, and then that jumps to the front of your or the top of your list to do. And so, when I look at putting this together, I think, well, are we going to get that much value out of it? Is it going to tell us that much more than we are able to tell on our own with our staff and your professionalism and your skill and your years of experience that you already have now? Are we getting that much more out of it? And And quite frankly, looking at, kind of the proposal that's been put together, I get a little nervous when I start seeing nice round numbers, on this month it's gonna cost you 10 grand, and this month it's gonna cost you 20 grand to put, these kinds of things together. It makes me, I'm not seeing, how many hours are we getting in? Who's actually looking at these materials? Like, what's the extra value beyond, what our staff are capable of doing and doing, I think quite well at right now, so.
Yeah, no, good questions, good questions. I performed the same plan in Norton Shores, my previous employer. We started about 8-9 years ago and finished up just before I left there. And we spent about $1 million on the sewer system alone and the storm sewer system alone. So about $2 million project, 2.3 if I remember correctly. And we didn't do the water. I think that city staff have the ability to look at these, and we have 4 different crew leaders and 2 different managers, and of course myself, and 7 different people looking at this. The format, the time it takes to look at all these things, we just don't have, in-house. And some of that is there's some experience as well, and institutional knowledge that walked out a few years ago as people started retiring. So, needing this help, and it is a big number. 330,000 is nothing to shake a stick at. So, but I think in the end we'll have a format that our staff wouldn't be able to put together necessarily, and that we can utilize that, be able to program some of those things in. So, I get it. We can keep going the way we're doing it, and we'd invest in what we would think would be the right infrastructure. But some of those, like criticality, we don't necessarily do it on that right now. We kind of look at it just a holistic, what happened this past year, and so we move something up, but not necessarily fully scientific, I should say.
Anything else?
The other thing, Derek, the big line underneath the highway that goes it goes from Madison on an angle to the manhole by Applebee's, and then shoots across. Just don't want to forget about that line, because that line is critical.
Yeah.
And it's still, and before we have Evan Marsh, the other engineering company told me that was taken care of. Well, it wasn't. And when Evan Marsh was doing their job, we found that out, and now we still got to deal with that line. And when we first talked about the infrastructure work, we talked about putting a lift station someplace on Dispeller Street and bringing that line right into this lift station. And being that old line is still there, we can still do that. So I'm not saying we have to or whatever, but that's a critical line right there, and it's still old, and it takes a lot of sewage down that way. And you could just tonight, and you know about that. We talked about that a little bit before. So,
Sure.
but yeah. So anyways, I just don't want to forget about that line, because that is a critical line. It goes all the way. It goes under Beacon Boulevard a long ways.
Other questions?
Yeah. Excuse me. I sat on the committee with a lot of other members, with Denny, and I think Kevin from the Planning Commission was on there. And it all boils down to, we need a plan. And the only way we're going to get a plan is if we do a study and prioritize the areas that need the work the soonest, and then move ahead with that. Even if you were looking at doing this over 40 years, you're talking like $14 million a year to spend on infrastructure, just over a 40-year period. I mean, we're talking a considerable amount of money just to replace and upkeep this stuff, and that wouldn't include upkeeping and everything else that we have. So it's going to be a major expense that at some point in time we're going to have to sit down and figure out exactly how it's going to all get dealt with. But it's going to amount to a lot of money, and to not have a plan when you're looking at spending that amount of money on a way to go forward, I don't think that's the way to go. I think we need a plan.
I'll echo that. I think that's true. I think that's why the whole committee agreed to do it this way. I think that we need the engineering company and you guys to look at the whole system and prioritize it, you know. I think we did the best we can with it, but I think now is the time to prioritize and take a look at the whole city and get a plan.
Question?
I have no well, anyway, I'll just say a few things. I did take a few classes on asset management a few years back when I went down Detroit to a university down there. Most of that was on infrastructure as far as the roads were in different area. But they were just starting out with talking about an asset management plan for total assets. Everything in there was really a neat little conversation I had with a lot of the county, actually a lot of counties were there because they wanted to see a bigger picture. I like the plan. I know going forward we'll need a plan. We had a plan. We've been putting money in for quite a few years now. When I first got on council, we didn't do any infrastructure really. We just fixed what was broken. Then we started making sure that we started taking the major parts done on it. We did Sheldon and all that. It was $30 million then, but it's always going to be 30 to 40, $50 million every turnaround because everything ages. So the number doesn't scare me because it's always going to be there. What we need to take care of is all the old stuff and start doing, because as soon as we get the older stuff done, what we thought was new stuff is now the old stuff. So it's kind of like a revolving door. You just keep going around. So we need to have a good plan. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm with Ryan there. It's a lot of money. But if you want to invest in the future of what our assets are in our town, we need to spend something and get it in a focus so we can see exactly what it is. Yeah, I think it's a good plan. I think it's a good start. Just got to figure out where the money's going to come from now.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I guess on that, you know, you could do a fair amount of infrastructure work for $338,000. So
Yes.
you're investing that in planning to do infrastructure work. I'm not opposed to having plans and knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it and when you're going to do it. Does seem like a pretty significant investment. When we started this as a council goal to relook and reprioritize, we've had a lengthy project list all along, and sometimes the importance of one project versus another changes, and so I thought that what we were doing was looking at that old project list and saying, well, what's changed? And let's reshuffle the deck and see what has to come first and second and so on. And we have a long-term funding mechanism in place that was passed 2 years ago, which we can take advantage of as it comes online, which is going to be somewhat gradual. So I assume that was the effort, was to look at things we knew about and figure out what to do first, second, and third based on upcoming funding and how things have changed. And I'm not opposed to creating a plan, an asset management plan. Like I say, it's a pretty substantial amount of money if that's spread out over a period of time, so you're kind of folding it into your efforts, then it makes sense to develop it as you go. I think we have a pretty good idea where we're going to start on our list. We already know that we've got Fulton Street, both sides of the highway to deal with in the next couple of years, so there's a big chunk, and I think it'll be a while before we have a meaningful amount of funding available, except for whatever we can get from grants. So while I would encourage us to have a plan, I don't want it to become a project in itself. I think it should be something that supports projects. So let's just make sure that we don't get the plan driving all of our costs, and that the plan is actually serving the needs of sorting out our costs.
Yeah, no, to follow up with a couple of those things, the information we'll be working on is putting together all of the details of all of our infrastructure. We don't have all of that in one, easy location, like the RGIS system, geographical information system, the mapping, where it locates all of our assets, but the details of those assets, how old is it, how big is it, what was it, installation date, materials, where each connection point is not in there. That's the stuff we'll be doing in the background to get that. They need that in order to actually put into the plan. So I thank you, Councilmember Cummins, for the support of the city staff. We do try, definitely, And, you know, we wouldn't think we would fail, but I think this is, you know, the future of our infrastructure is to utilize this. And I say, like, I use the hospital as an example. You know, if there was an old water main there that isn't breaking, and all of a sudden, you know, 1 year we have a bunch of failures there, that's not the time to replace it. The time would be before that happens. And so this will how, hey, this is critical and it's old, yet it hasn't failed yet. We don't want it to fail before, you know, it affects our community. So some of those things is what would be drawn out with this plan. So
as we roll into a plan like this, developing an asset management plan, of course, we'll have to appropriate money as we go to pay for the progress of it.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have milestones, deliverables, things where we can tell whether we're getting where we want to go. So it can be kind of a living plan in that sense, that we can keep it going or change the direction of it as we need to.
absolutely, yep. You know, once we have it in hand, it's a you know, for lack of a better term, let's say it's a big Excel spreadsheet. We can change the formulas. You know, we can say, hey, we want to focus on you know, the 9 criticalities next instead of the 7s or 8s or something different. You know, maybe we come across additional funding so we can focus more on roads or resurfacing and stretch the dollar instead of focusing on reconstruction. So it'll be a tool, you know, and it's got to be living. It's got to change. It's not just to deliver it in 2024 and we put it on the shelf and we just keep reading from it for the next 10 years.
Absolutely, we don't want another water tank hill.
No.
You know, that was 100 years old. That was one of the assets we overlooked for a long time, not realizing how bad it really was.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to look at the whole town as an asset management plan, because the sewers and the water mains all fit together like a puzzle. The big ones go into, you know, I mean, the big water mains go into the smaller water mains, and you need to look at the whole thing. It's the same with sewer mains. And some of those sewer mains, when you look at them, you'll be able to lower some of those. If you look at them right, you can lower some of those sewer mains so that they can sustain themselves without knowing where exactly those lines are and how you can lower them. You're just piecemealing everything together, and that's what was going on before. And I'm completely against that. I mean, it goes together like a puzzle, and if you don't get it right, then you screw the whole thing up.
All right.
Okay.
Pat?
I just wanted to add really quickly, this did go a little longer than we expected, so we will probably need to carry the work session over into the regular meeting. I hope that's okay tonight. But this does remind me of 2004 when we started out with a different engineering firm, but probably $125,000 or $150,000 we paid for a plan.
Yep.
And then that plan guided us through probably $35 million worth of infrastructure investment. And it gave us a very high confidence level, and we're trying to program each dollar based on the risk of not fixing certain things and trying to measure those things. This gives us the metric that it is pretty scientific, and I think Derek and his guys could probably do it, but they've got other full-time jobs they're working on all the time. So to spend the kind of time that needs to be spent, you know, that $300,000, $350,000 are hours spent. That's what we're paying for, is a lot of engineering, professional time spent crunching numbers, looking at flows of sewer and what types of development are in what different parts of town and where we expect other development and what's our reliability study saying, the way these pieces all fit together. And if we're hoping to do $40 to $50 million worth of infrastructure investment over the next 20 years, starting with a really rock solid plan. And I know that the current city council and future city councils will never be susceptible to political maneuvering of any sort, but a rock solid plan like this is something you can really stand behind and say, this is what we're building and this is the order we're building it in. And it gives you a real peace of mind that the political process is very separate from this super scientific effort that you made. And you'll be very impressed, I guarantee you, with the deliverables that you get. And there'll be milestones and progress checkpoints so that you feel like your dollars are being well invested. But I got some sticker shock too. I think we can get a lot of sewer built with $350,000. But to have a plan that we, you know, I think one of you guys said the committee talked about this and came to this conclusion, like this is the best way to go. So
what are you looking for from us tonight?
just what you've done.
Okay.
A discussion, and we'll be coming back with a budget adjustment request in the next month or so to get this year's costs taken care of.
All right. All right, well, the time is 7:29 7:30 according to my clock, so we're going to adjourn the work session. We'll pick it up again during our regular meeting at the appropriate time for our second item on work session. So, closing the work session, we will roll directly into our regular council meeting so I'm going to open the regular city council meeting of September 20th, 2021. Ashley, would you call the roll?
Dora,
Here.
Cummins,
Here.
Scott,
Here?
Fritz,
Here.
Manetza.
Here. Invocation this evening is by Reverend Dr. Jerry Kramer. Following the invocation, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
The Lord be with you. Let us pray. O Lord, our governor, bless the leaders of our land, that we may be a people at peace among ourselves and a blessing to other nations of the earth. To the president and members of the cabinet, to governors of states, mayors of cities, and to all in administrative authority, give wisdom and grace in the exercise of their duties. To senators and representatives and those who make our laws in cities, states, and towns, give courage, wisdom, and foresight to provide for the needs of all our people and to fulfill our obligations in the community of nations. To the judges and officers of our courts, give understanding and integrity that human rights may be safeguarded and justice served. And finally, teach our people to rely on your strength and to accept their responsibilities to their fellow citizens, that they may elect trustworthy leaders and make wise decisions for the well-being of our society, that we may serve you faithfully in our generation and honor your holy name. And Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, this evening we ask that you will send down upon those who hold office in this city of Grand Haven the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose they may faithfully serve in their offices to promote the well-being of all people through Jesus Christ our Lord.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. The next item on business is an appointment.
This is to appoint Stacy Fedowa to the Community Land Trust Board, term ending June 30th, 2024.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Fritz, second by Cummins. Questions on this appointment? And if not, I believe we can vote.
Cummins,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes?
Fritz,
Yes.
Dora,
Yes.
Manetza.
Yes. Our next item of business is a presentation on the 2021 Circle of Cakes program. Pat, do you want to introduce things?
Yes, Your Honor. This summer, we had a summer music series at Bolt Park with WAWL doing this concert series. But for the, I think, third summer in a row, we did a Circle of Cakes where during a couple of intermissions during the concert, Tina and I, and often helped by Mike and Lisa Dora and other volunteers when we couldn't do it, but most frequently Tina and I were able to make it, and we'd go out front, and the way this would work is we would, and it's an age-old thing that has been around for a long time, but for those of you that might not know, you put paper plates in a great big circle out in front of the band, and you get all the kids up there, and it's kind of a musical chairs type thing. They go in circles, and when the music stops, wherever they're standing, you draw out a number, and that child wins a cake. Compliments of D&W, and we've got some representatives from the D&W bakery here tonight. Beautiful cakes that they would donate each week, and the kids were very excited. So tonight we've invited everybody that was involved in that effort to be here with us so that we could express our gratitude. And Your Honor, we want to start out with a special thank you to a young lady who was a stalwart supporter of the effort and benefited. I can't believe she's not about 300 pounds at this point, because I think she won a cake almost every week. So if you want to go ahead and announce the winner of our annual event.
Our champion of the Circle of Cakes is Ella Marble, and I have a plaque for you. Certificate of recognition for Ella Marble, 2021
keep us going in circles. So here you go, hand them this nice thank you card from the city and from you. You go on up and hand that to them, then we'll get a nice picture. Thank you. Go up there and stand with those guys and get the cake princess. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, so next we're gonna have the B&W Bakery staff come up, so we can thank you guys. We're here by the mayor.
Charles.
Okay, right?
Andrea is also one of our greatest poll workers. She also works at the B&W Bakery, so.
And then our princess of cakes, Miss Ellis, gonna give you your card.
Alright.
And then we have a couple cards.
So stand there with them, princess.
Then here's the extras to give to the fellow bakers.
I know there's a lot of people baked all those cakes at the store. And then, you're up, Tina, you and Ella want to hand out the.
Oh, yeah! Oh, yeah, we have cupcakes for everybody!
Oh.
That's the best part.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, man, I gotta have one in the middle here, Pat. Oh, geez, I'm not gonna get it out, but I got it. Thanks.
Make sure everybody up here gets one.
Oh, man, look at this, huh?
I don't know why you gave me like 2 dozen of them, but.
Yeah, thank you so very much. Congratulations.
You can pass them down.
Oh, yeah, the beer guys have plates in there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Cake Princess. Excellent.
Thank you.
Sometime, somewhere.
All right.
I think you probably do it in the bathroom.
Have one over there. Grab what kind you want.
He's not a picky guy.
Okay.
Who wants one? Anybody else? Who wants one? You guys want one? Am I gonna do
There's still plate. Oh, I got one right there. I got a steel plate.
I got, man, like that, nice little orange on it.
Camera, so he's hoping to get one of us eating a cupcake and slopping it all over.
Slop it all over.
I did.
Come on.
Might as well eat it up.
Hey, you need a cupcake.
Very good.
You can take the mask down to eat the cupcake, by the way.
Okay. They can all know.
Oh, yeah, come on.
Oh, that great. That's excellent.
No, can't say no to the cupcake.
Make sure Ella gets one.
There you go. Cupcake, cupcake. Cupcake, all right.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you, Miss Ella.
Thank you so very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, D&W. Thank you, WAWL. Thank you, everybody. It was such a great summer out there, so thank you so very much.
And I will point out that WAWL was the first one out of the gate when it was time to have outdoor music. They jumped on it and went right away, I think in June. They were having live music in Bolt Park, and boy, a lot of people showed up. People were waiting to get out, and I think I saw all of you out there at least once or twice this summer, so a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to 2022 and an even better summer of cake. Wrong with cake. So thank you, Your Honor, for that. Okay, well, thank you, Pat, and thank you, Eric, and for Ella and everybody else. What a great thing to do in the summer.
Yeah.
And I'd better thank my wife, because
And
every
Tina.
Tuesday night, I dragged her over there, and she helped out with every single one,
And
so.
particularly, thank you, Tina.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. And I dragged her down tonight. I gotta drop that news on her today that she needed to help one more time.
Uh-huh.
She rocked it out. Thanks, Tina.
Thank you.
And off she goes. All right, well, that was fun. That brings us to the approval of the consent and regular agendas. One change that we've talked about is that at our second meeting in August, we postponed action on the authorization for the bonds for the BLP, and we postponed it specifically to this meeting today. And since then, the BLP has canceled their plan, and in addition to that, we have an agenda item which preemptively rescinds anything else that we've passed on the bonds. And so my suggestion would be that we simply remove that item from the agenda. It will be pretty much meaningless.
So moved.
Okay, well, okay, so any other changes to the agenda?
That is the only one I had tonight, Your Honor.
Okay. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, then I need Mr. Dora made a motion to approve the agenda as modified.
As modified with item 13B removed.
Okay,
I'll second it.
second by Fritz. Okay. Questions on the motion? Let's vote.
Scott,
Yes.
Fritz,
Yes.
Dora,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
Manetza.
Yes. And that brings us to our first call to the audience. So at this time, members of the audience may address council on any item, whether on the agenda or not. Those addressing council are asked to provide their name and address, will be limited to 3 minutes of speaking time. Council will hear all comments for future consideration, but will not have a response at this time.
My name is Jeffrey Miller. I live at 1120 South Harbor Drive. First of all, I want to thank Councilman Dora for the compassion and interest he showed in helping 2 homeless people find suitable housing over the Labor Day weekend. I hope that he is also successful in working with others to make reliable, dependable support for those in need in Grand Haven a 24/7 reality. Second, I want to thank Mayor Manetza and Councilman Dora for attending in person and Councilman Cummins via Zoom in witnessing the BLP's monthly Board of Directors meeting last week. I think it is very important that as many channels of communication be established between the BLP and Council as possible. Only through open communication can constructive legislation be introduced, understood by all, and hopefully pass with overwhelming community support. I also appreciate the mayor's comment and request in conjunction with my own subsequent request at the BLP meeting that the BLP pull their Eagle Air Permit application. Since the peaking power plant is no longer being considered, commenting on the air permit would be a waste of time, and its withdrawal would be considered a goodwill gesture by the community. Unfortunately, the BLP did not show any deference to the mayor's request and refused to withdraw the air permit at the meeting. They will consider the request at the next BLP meeting, but as was pointed out at the time, by then the matter will be moot, and in the meanwhile, people, interested parties, and possible remonstrators will still have to spend needless time and effort to communicate their concerns to Eagle. In addition, tonight, you'll be asked under new business, specifically item 12B, to vote on the issuance of a new notice of intent regarding the new amount of $28 million in bonds for the BLP. But please note that the BLP purposely omitted the snow melt system under this request, even though it was part of the original notice of intent. Yet again, the BLP is demonstrating its indifference to community needs by excluding the snow melt system in the new NOI because of a narrow interpretation by only one attorney. While City Council is listening and is sensitive to the interests and concerns of its citizens, it seems as though the BLP shows little regard for what the community thinks and wants. They only pay attention when the whole City Council acts. Therefore, I would urge Council not to take its eye off the ball. Make sure that what the City Council and its citizens of Grand Haven want is adhered to by the BLP. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
My name is Lisa Royce. I live at 17700 Navajo Drive in Ferrysburg. I own the property at 1432 Washington. I'm here about the Berserk Brewery having a festival or whatever. I didn't hear about it until somebody told me you guys were meeting about it on City Council, and I watched it on YouTube. And I wanted to thank Mr. Scott for bringing up issues because my property is right next door. I own a 4-unit building with rental property there. I have some concerns about the lateness of it. I believe that the time should be back down if you're going to allow this to happen. The original site plan, I was here for those meetings, said that they would have no live music at it, and they had no outdoor seating. Well, now we have the outdoor seating, and now they're about to do outdoor music. We have residents that live right next door. That's their home with children. I have 2 children that live upstairs. The bottom of the apartments, those are the bedroom windows that are on the parking lot. The arborvitae that was put up, maybe in 30 or 40 years, will it block the noise or whatever? It's not adequate to block what is currently there. I believe if you guys are going to allow this to happen, that the hours should be changed to noon to 9. So, I mean, this is a residential neighborhood. I understand it abuts commercial property. I've owned the house for 28 years. All the other businesses were 9 to 5 businesses, so it never ever came up. And I'm not for the business to fail, and that's not why I'm here. But we have, I mean, you guys are here for safety, health, and welfare of the community, not just one entity. And there's a lot of people around there. There's a lot of houses behind and down the front. I believe that Anita and Bruce Emmons should access their property on the other side of the sign factory. They have a whole lot right there where they could put a tent that would block the noise from a band or whatever music. I don't know what type of music they're talking about. Nobody contacted me being immediately next door. At your meeting, you said some people were contacted, but I mean, I'm right on the edge. I mean, I'm right there, and my husband and I never got any information that this was happening. So I'm all for Dave Palmer does, well, used to be Spread the Music, Walk the Beat, whatever he does, and that's a wonderful thing, but he doesn't block streets down to do it, and it's during the day, and it calms down at night, and I know it gets big, and I had talked to Pat about it, and he had some concerns about, you know, stuff going into the streets and stuff, and I understand that, you know, that's an issue, and that stuff needs to be addressed. But when I watched the meeting, there was some other people that had concerns. I know you said City Farmer had some concerns about blocking the street off. I mean, and there's parking problems there. I know with COVID, they were allowed to have outdoor seating, but that wasn't in the original site plan to have outdoor seating. And so they have the big plastic houses still out there that nobody's been in them all summer long. And so I guess my question is, you know, how long is that going to happen? Are they going to get to, you know, change the rules of the original site plan? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name's Jim Hagan, 400 Lake, and I wanted to provide you with an update on the potential for community solar on Harbor Island. I've talked about it several times in the past, and I was talking with Jan Yelema about it, and he said, hey, why don't you just go down to Grand Rapids Water Treatment Plant? You know, they're assembling an array right now. So the next day I jumped in my car and I went down there, talked to the gentleman who was working there, you know, and he told me basically what I had read in the newspaper. It's a 1 megawatt, approximately 3-acre array. And I said, oh, that's great. I'll go on my engineering tools and see what things look like and so forth. And of course, I was told by Carol, who I live with, she said, you know, people don't want to see all those technical details. Tell them something that they can relate to in real life. So I ran the numbers, and I think what people can relate to is the number of houses. What a small community solar array could do in Harbor Island, a 1 megawatt maybe 3 or 4 acres. There seems to be debate on how much land that would take. It would provide energy to 200 houses using the average monthly consumption rate of 554 kilowatt hours per month, and that's a BLP published rate. What does that mean in the city? If you could look at each block in the city, you'll see something between 15 and 25 houses. So if we took 200 houses and let's say 20 per block, that's 10 blocks of the city could be provided with electricity through a small community solar array. Or I bet BLP could tell us what the consumption of Main Street looks like. And I suspect that Main Street could be powered by that array. And we've been told before by, I think Dave mentioned, he said, well, you know, Harbor Island has its substation, and those circuits feed downtown. So basically, if there was a small solar array down there, people would be getting, you know, people who bought into the array, bought panels, would be getting credit on the electric bill, but, you know, downtown would be using it. What better optics? And I mean, it's not even optics. It's what better could we do than provide green energy ourselves? And some people have said, well, you know, they're ugly. Well, I went to, I talked with a gentleman today, John, I guess it's Kinch. He's an executive director of one of the organizations, and he said, go to the East Lansing site and look at the community solar park and see what they've done. And they've actually done a great job. They received a first prize in Michigan for what they did. They built a pollinator garden underneath the array, in between the array. And so when I think about that, you know, it really excites me because you can get green energy here. You can have a beautiful park-like atmosphere that supports butterflies, it supports the birds, and it supports native plants. So what I'd like to do once again is ask you to make sure it's on a list so it's looked at in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Who's next? If no one's coming forward, then we're going to close call to the audience. There will be a second call to the audience at the end of the meeting, and you're welcome to address council at that time. Of course, at that time, we'll be done with our business for the evening, but last chance if anybody would like to address council at this point in time. Okay, we're going to close the call to the audience and move on with our agenda. So, we're going to do a continuation of our work session, and we are going to hear about the EDA grant proposal.
Thank you, Your Honor. I talked about this briefly during city manager reports at the last meeting. Wanted to give a little more information tonight to give you more to consider and also set the stage for further explanation about what particularly the marina needs are down along the waterfront. You know, we've done some work identifying things that would be potentially eligible for funding through Economic Development Administration, Build Back Better grants. Several $1 billion have been sent the way of the Economic Development Administration. We've not been successful in the past working with the EDA. We've yet to, at least since the early 2000s, since I've been here, we've not had any grants come through that department. But this one sounded very promising. We met with our representative from Chicago a few weeks ago and spelled out some of the thoughts we were having, and he went through and kind of gave us feedback. And by us, I mean, I think Ashley, myself, Tony, Derek sat in on a meeting with Lee Sherry and Dave B. from the West Michigan Planning in Grand Rapids. And they gave us some guidance what projects would likely score well and likely do well. So we put together an idea of 3 projects, trying to get those knocked off, knowing we need to do all 3 eventually. They're not going to not be necessary in the long run, and I don't know that we're going to get a better opportunity to get other money to come in and pay for some serious improvements that we need to make over the next decade at most. I would think if we put it off that long, we'll be in some dire shape. So looking at each one, I don't know if you can go through this. Did you want me to? Those are the 3 areas. Tony put this map together for me. Looking at area 1 over there by the boat launch, area 2, the linear park, and area 3 being the marina area. There's the boat launch. That was at very high water, obviously, and it's kind of a little peninsula out there. But ideally, we would like to raise that up. I'm not sure how high, 30 inches, 36 inches, to give us real clearance for the next time the water comes up. We know it's going to come up again at some point, and we'd like to not be at risk and lose it again when that happens. So we'd like to raise it up, and we've got some cost estimates coming up at the end here. Another area then is that whole linear park. If you look along on the north side of the South Channel there, that whole length there is coming apart, and it's not very well armored. So we get in there and dig that all out and refortify it with riprap. And the price tag there, I believe, was $800,000, and these are some very early estimates. That gives you an idea what the water did to that path. That's just kind of zooming in. You can sort of see it there in the middle where that one path goes up and around. You can sort of see it there, but you get a lot better view of it here, where we really need to do some work down there. And then finally, just the Municipal Marina. And Mike Mulfree's here. He's got some detail on the marina, depending on how deeply you want to get into it tonight. He's willing to come back to a future meeting and give you some more detail. But here are some estimated costs, and you can see in the bottom line on the far right, $5,370,000 of needs out there, plus engineering. That includes engineering. I'm sorry, that includes, what a bargain. Thank you, Tony. That includes the nearly $700,000 in engineering. And then our thought process was if we could apply for 60% of the hard costs from EDA, that'd be about $2.8 million, leaving us with about a $1.8 million match and close to $700,000 in engineering. About $2.5 million of match money. We think we could probably access other funding, Coastal Zone Management, Michigan Natural Resource Trust Fund, Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund, Michigan Waterways Commission, and possibly U.S. Army Corps. It's, federal funding can't really match federal funding, but we'd want to talk to them. We say, not limited to. So we're looking for affirmation from council to be fairly aggressive and go after these dollars and start building the financial package we need to be able to tackle a project of that magnitude. Right now we've got no resources assigned and really no plan to start making the improvements on, I think, what are pretty critical, important assets that we do want to maintain and retain. And I don't know that the long-range picture presents any better breakdown than this. Now, chances are, if we go to the EDA as our first stop on this list, they'd be the largest single funder, we would commit to that $2.5 million. And that may end up including, if we're unsuccessful at all these other areas, which I don't think we would be. I think some of them would find it very attractive to participate in such a well-leveraged project. But in the event we struck out, we'd need to bond for that $2.5 million to be able to do this project. But, again, it beats the alternative of 5 or 6 years from now with City Council looking at it and saying, well, we need to bond for the full, at that point, maybe $7 or $8 million worth of costs if we, put it off and wait. There is also the possibility of the infrastructure package coming down the pike that we may be able to tap into some of that too. So just wanted to get City Council's affirmation, and I don't know, do you have Mike's slides ready to go up if we want a quick run through those? Because Mike could probably do that in a hurry. As long as Mike's here, he's our marine engineering expert at Avonmarsh, and he took the time to drive up here from, I don't know where he lives, but it's not in Grand Haven.
Yep.
St. Joe. So thanks for being here tonight, Mike.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. So this is a short version of the work sessions that we did back in the spring of 2019. Some of you may remember that. Thank you. So in 2019, we separated this preliminary engineering study into 3 different work sessions. I'm going to attempt to give you a summary of that today. So first we went through, this slide's loading kind of funky. Oh, I see, I'm scrolling.
Okay.
I'm doing that right. There we go. Thanks. We did a condition assessment. We looked at several of the marina components out there. We found that there was a bunch of needs, and this was back in 2018-19, so I'm pretty sure a lot of these needs remain. To look at the ground fault protection system and the electrical systems in the marina, the decking was in really rough shape, which ties into the floating dock discussion that we'll have. There were some minor issues like this timber pile. I think some of those have already been corrected. Some of the utility lines were in the water where they go underneath the gangways, leaving them prone to ice damage and other conditions. And then ADA accessibility. These docks are, I think, built back in 2005. Most of the floaters were built. So the gangways are somewhat short at low water, and you don't get the slope that you need. Going through here's a view of what some of the decking looks like out there, starting to come up. You can see all the supplemental nails. We saw the need for some of the flotation in the docks. These timber docks, any floating docks, I mean, once one thing goes bad, you can Band-Aid it for a little while, and you get a little bit more life out of it. But when you reach that 20-year age, the Band-Aiding really isn't a good life cycle plan, tying in with your asset management discussions earlier. So at some point, when you get to about that 20-year life, you've got to replace those docks. And there's some other needs that I'll get into related to that. Moving forward. So here's one of the flotation images where you can see that the flotation in the docks is not holding up well. Next slide, please. So the recommendations really back in 2013 and 14 were to replace the floaters. And that was primarily driven by the usage needs and the demand for a different mix of slips. The only way to create that mix of slips is to go with a longer dock and to move those docks landward and to replace them. We also looked at all these safety and repair issues with decking, the utilities that I mentioned, as well as ADA and ground fault protection. Slide, please. And as far as recommendations, first recommendation, replace the floating docks. Now that's a big chunk of dollars that we just heard from city manager about, and we recognize that that might be a challenge, and so we looked at phasing plans. But with this opportunity with the EDA grant, it may be your best chance to get a shot at that. Slip mix I talked about. Right now they're all 30-foot slips down the floating docks, and that's not really serving the demand that exists there. The slip quantity, so we have an opportunity to increase the number of slips and the linear footage of docks. And then a need for some dinghy docks. There's a high usage pattern there that isn't well served with the docks that are there now. And then, of course, the utilities, which tie hand in hand with the docks. It's hard to replace one without replacing the other. This looks like the market study part of the slides. I'm cutting off the bottom there. We looked at 10 different facilities in the region just to get an idea for how Grand Haven's Municipal Marina is doing. Next slide, please. And some of the key findings were that the transient rates are pretty well in line with the other municipal marinas, with Muskegon and White Lake. The facilities and amenities were pretty consistent as far as what they have, but the condition and the age and the maintenance of those facilities is really what sets everybody apart from each other. Of course, the location here is accessible to a large population, high quality destination, a great place to boat to. And then the slip mix really is a big weak point. Right now there's a high demand for slips that are 35 feet and longer, and we really can't serve that with the slips that are there now effectively. Next slide. So recommendations really to update the amenities and services, and when you look at that, you look at the docks. That was really one of those recommendations that when the funding is available to get to as soon as possible. And then look at some other opportunities that might exist, like a boat rental business to provide access for more people that maybe don't have a boat of their own. And then some packages with local businesses, like a float and fish type of operation. And then we did a public survey. This is going all the way back to May of 2018, so quite a time ago. There were 268 responses to that survey, so we got a pretty good amount of feedback. And the next slide is going to tell us a little bit about what we took away. I mean, you know that it's a premier destination. This is a fantastic place to go. But there was a big desire for new floating docks and expanding that slip mix. Right now it's restrictive. We can't get everybody here that wants to be here. And then slip availability. That's actually a big issue. You can't serve the number of boats that want to be here and want to visit here. There were a couple comments about the fish cleaning station and a shower facility. Again, those are back in 2018, so that may not be front of mind right now. And then at the lower part of the marina, closest to Lake Michigan, there was some wave energy from time to time, given the right conditions, and so something needed to be thought about in that area. So now we get into the preferred plan. This is the last part of these slides and probably the most important part. There was this concept of moving the docks closer to the seawall. Right now, a big portion of the length of the facility includes riprap in front of the seawall, on the river side of the seawall. And that keeps the docks pretty far away from the seawall, and they're pinned up against the channel. So we really can't make the docks longer because we don't have the space. So part of this project proposes removing that riprap material, which was always a part of the plan, and then moving the docks closer to the seawall to be able to put longer finger piers in and achieve that slip mix that we know is in demand. That gets us about another 18 feet on average. Next slide. So here's the preferred plan. Kind of hard to see with the overview, but you can see that the main pier, the head piers, are moved all the way against the seawall. The gangways, the transition from land down to that floating dock that's got to change with water levels, end up going parallel to the seawall, which really allows us to achieve ADA without a whole lot of challenge and with a lot of efficiency. And then you can see that the slips get a lot longer, so the ends of those finger piers are going to be kind of where they are now. It's just that that head pier is going to move almost 20 feet closer to land. Next slide. And these are just a couple zoomed in views if we wanted to circle back to any questions, just showing how that layout happens. Now this eastern half, we've got some areas that might be flexible space. That could be places for personal watercraft docks. It could be a dinghy dock, multi-use possibilities. And the overall cost for that was about $3.3 million. We've increased that a little bit since we did the study, just knowing that it's 4 years later, and of course we've got inflation and some rising costs. But that does get a linear foot of dockage increase of about 35%. So you look at the total linear footage now, which is about 1,200 linear feet, and we get almost, we get up over 1,600 linear feet. The plan has 11 ADA compliant slips, which is way more than is the minimum required, but provides a good mix to those that maybe have a challenge in getting to the boat. And then the slip mix, we go from 30-foot slips today to a range of 35 to 45-foot slips. And about the same number of slips, it's just that there's a bigger range in those. So that's a quick overview. Hopefully that jogs some memories, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, who has questions? Anyone?
Yeah, some questions. Thank you, Pat, and thank you, sir, for coming and presenting some further detail and information. I appreciate that. I think it's definitely worth some discussion. Pat, what other, I certainly understand kind of the reasoning for bringing these forward. I'm not knocking on them here. I do have some kind of follow-up questions on them. But what other items were maybe considered? You mentioned that there's some scoring criteria, and that you met with the folks from the Economic Development Administration to determine which projects are most likely to succeed with an application. So now what were all the projects that were considered, and why are these the best and most likely to succeed?
I'm trying to remember what one of them was that we pitched was, snowmelt. I thought maybe snowmelt was something that might pique their interest, that the intent of these tourism and recreation dollars is to boost up economies in areas where perhaps our tourist and recreation industry suffered during the pandemic, and I think you could argue it did. Locally, that many restaurants closed down, many hospitality interests suffered significant losses, so to the extent we can improve our recreational infrastructure using some of this money, they would be very interested. And they thought snowmelt was probably not one of those things that would be of interest. I don't know if Tony remembers what the reasoning was, but I know that one was one that I led with and didn't find purchase.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. That's correct. Pat did start with snowmelt, and there's a 25% set aside of these dollars for tourism projects. And as Lee said, we're still the EDA, so we care about jobs. Mm-hmm. So they felt that with some of the modeling we've done in the past, with the economic impact of the marina and the boat launch on the community, that we can tie to direct jobs. They liked that because there was a matrix that they could say, for our investment, Grand Haven will get this kind of job benefit in the community. So that was why they glommed onto this, was there is a direct correlation, economic models between recreational boating and job creation in the community. So that was the reason they had some interest in this set of projects.
And a couple others that just really aren't ripe yet, like one is what's going to happen on the rest of Harbor Island. And we just don't know yet, and we don't have cost estimates, and there's just not enough certainty, and they want applications by December of this year. So we're really not gonna be in a position to ask for specific, because I would have loved to have made a case for, you know, we know there's going to be some adjustment in the type of uses out there. We're not sure exactly what it's gonna look like. So that would have been a good one, but we just don't know what is gonna be needed. And the other one that sticks out to me is the need to repair and replace the revetment in the city as it goes from Waterfront Stadium down to Government Pond. You know, we're responsible for that, at least down to Howard Street, and that's a very old steel revetment. It's again ripeness. We don't have good engineering done. We don't know what that's gonna cost, so I just wasn't able to throw that out there as a possibility. You know, it's something that we probably should be looking at, though.
Okay. What about like some of the beyond the pier pieces that we've kind of recently studied and looked at? You know, I know we don't have a direct project. Is that what it is? We don't have like a direct, you know, we're just now getting to the RFQ or our process?
Yeah, we don't yet have a defined enough project like this that we can pitch to them. So we talked about that briefly and said there are other future projects. We don't know exactly what they are yet, but they're going to be coming, like a market that maybe needed to be publicly funded, and I would expect the EDA would be a good target when that time comes. So, you know, we can go back to that source again. It's not like this is a one-time only thing, because I do suspect if the infrastructure bill that is being discussed ends up passing, some of that money will make its way through EDA as well. So it's a good bet that we'll be able to go back at it, and another good reason to get this RFP in, or RFQ in, and figure out what we're gonna do there, just so that we can put some meat on that bone and be ready for that funding source.
Yeah, quite a better opportunity. There's some job opportunities that are pretty significant with that. The boat launch, you know, reconstruction, I know early on when it was underwater, we had gotten that estimate to kind of raise it up. So, you know, resilience of that's something that's a moneymaker, right? And drives, and has an economic benefit. I see the reasoning there. You know, my linear park, you know, I have mixed feelings on. I you know, it certainly has some shoreline protection needs. I can see what's there. I see that I think there's a lot of there's parts of it that are falling into the river and being taken away. I just struggle with rebuilding a bunch of pathways that on an island that we don't know what the long-term plan is with it. You know, so I don't know how much extra that those portions are, and I'm sure they probably want the pathways built because they want people to walk on them to say that they're visiting the area, right? So, some you know, it's a little mixed just because we, you know, do we want to replace exactly what's there? Is there an opportunity to have a greater vision and a greater plan, which I think is what the community is going to want, depending on, you know, after we have all of these, you know, environmental discussions and figure out what options we have. So that's where I'm at with that. And then on the marina reconstruction, one question I had was on the how does the because I see there's the riprap there now, and obviously you're going to remove that and then put this tow in there. Does that mitigate the wave issues more than what's there?
Yeah, it actually won't mitigate more than what's there. What's there is a, you know, sloped riprap slope that does absorb some of that, but I think the bigger wave mitigation issue is actually coming from downstream. So it's not like a lakefront sloped revetment that we need to be worried about in this case. So the docks themselves are actually going to absorb a fair amount of that energy from vessel wakes, you know, your smaller period waves, that type of thing. So actually, this has been a part of the long-term plan for that marina for quite a long time. It just costs some dollars because of the material that we have to remove from that spot.
I didn't know if that was part of, because, you know, obviously the wave mitigation was part of what folks were saying needs to be. So that's going to be those other slips that are further towards the waterfront stadium that are more of that issue then, which makes sense based on where they're at. I just didn't know if there's some issues in that area too. So we're not quite hitting that target. You know, I have some concerns that we're not really adding more slips. Yeah, we're getting a greater slip mix, but the area that we're putting these slips in at are areas that, you know, we have our charter fleet who you know, we have good solid occupancy there. And this is a really big investment to make. And, you know, are we going to be charging them more for these slips? Are they going to be longer, wider, which they are going to be? You know, we have a marina that's losing money, and this is a significant investment to make for, you know, more slips, you know, in our highest occupancy slip area. You know, I see that we have some needs, but we also have a losing marina, and, you know, what's our return on this investment going to be, you know, long term? They bring economic development, so we have to weigh that out, certainly, and what they bring, but should the city be the one subsidizing all of that economic development? Those are questions that I think that as policymakers, we have to make some decisions on, especially when we're talking about additional debt service on top of that. And even though these are federal dollars, trust me, my generation is still paying the debt service on that, because it's all debt that the federal government's you know, taken on to provide those dollars. So just some mixed feelings. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Anyone else?
I have to agree on a few things there, is especially the boat launch. We know that definitely needs a lot of work. But my take on the linear park thing is this, basically all we're looking at is just shoring that up so it's more stable, so we don't lose any more of it, if I remember correctly. Isn't that what we're doing with that? We're not putting more trails in or anything. We're just maintaining, you know, building it up so we don't lose it in there. That's what the improvement was supposed to be, if I remember. Isn't that what you brought on it?
That's my understanding, is that this is, you know, the alternative would be to not do it, and just it would continue to be in a condition as you see it today.
It would just continue to erode, because
when the water comes back up, it would erode more. You know, it'd probably stay like it is. We could do some minor investments and try to, you know, probably shift the path a little more inland and just leave it kind of rough and difficult along there. But when the water would come up again, we'd lose more of the island. So it is a shoreline stabilization effort. Now, I don't know if Ryan's suggesting that we wait and try to do something more significant there, where we would maybe put in a revetment and deepen the channel to open it up to additional boat traffic. You know, that could be a better way to go, but I don't know what the cost is of that and when that might happen. You know, sometimes the enemy of a good plan is the perfect plan. You know, you think, well, maybe we could do better with something a little better, but I don't have that in sight right now, so I'm just looking to restore. You know, we asked Avonmarsh to give us some costs. Look at how beat up it is over there. Tell us what it would take to restore that and get the path back like it was and have a stable bank there. And that's the estimate. Now, how much of that estimate is actual riprap and how much is surface restoring?
The vast majority of that's actually pulling the existing riprap out, putting new fabric on there, and then re-rocking the shoreline, and then there's some recreation of the path that's been eroded out and on. So the vast majority of it's just to stabilize what's there now for the next, 40 years, or however long.
Yeah, part of that's gonna depend on what water levels do, right? I mean, if we repair it as it is now, we've seen water levels drop about 2 feet since we were at close to those record highs. We might be in a 20-year period where we are back down to long-term average levels, or that could be another 10 years or 5 years before we're right back up 2 more feet like we were. So it's gonna be a function of that. And I think as part of this project, this EDA opportunity, it's something that we could have pretty shovel-ready pretty quickly, and that makes some sense. But there's certainly a lot of different options about what could be done there as part of a bigger plan.
In your experience, when you do a project like this, what's the life expectancy? How many years you usually get out of a good bank stabilization project with big riprap like what we have there now?
Yeah, I guess that ties hand in hand with water levels, and that cycle's been in the 10 to 20 year period, and I think it'd be reasonable to expect that we'll be back up at that record high level within the next 20 years. So that said, there's already stone there. We'd be adding stone layer to that. So that mass does help absorb that, that flow and that tendency to scour. So there's probably some things we could do better than we did last time, I would think.
And when you were looking at it, did you determine exactly when that work was done that was there? Was it, 1995 or something around there?
Yeah, we didn't ask that, we had to re-spec out, but when was the path built?
I got here in 2003, and it was somewhat seasoned when I got here, but it wasn't brand new, so I'm thinking it might have been 10 years old at that time. So maybe early 90s. So we've gotten close to 30 years out of it so far. So whatever we do, we can probably count on 30 years before we'd be getting back in there and.
That's reasonable, yep.
And does it, I'm sorry.
Very good, that's all.
I was gonna ask if a steel revetment, is that something that lasts a lot longer typically if you actually drive steel piling in there?
A lot longer. Of course, you do have, vessel wakes there, and so, the more that you're gonna have vertical walls, the more reflection you're gonna have. So, not ideal from that perspective, but yeah, steel wall is gonna last a lot longer.
Does that give it more wave action for the boats though, coming, bouncing
Yeah.
off and get in there? So it's a small channel, you don't want that, with a riffraff, it at least, it absorbs that energy when it comes in.
Exactly,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. And there may be other options, with a little bit more time, trying to get this EDA package together, there might be other options to consider there. There's some softer shoreline methods, there's some natural shoreline protection that may or may not be appropriate in that area. I've not personally studied it, so I'm just giving you some general information at this point.
I think it's a pretty good idea, to be honest with you myself. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of have the same sentiments that Ryan has on the boat launch. I think that's a good spot to make some improvements and raise that up so we can continue to have that and not lose it for all the time that we did in the past years. We have a lot of out-of-town people who do come in and use that area, which of course brings, revenue and business to downtown area because they go around, they go out in the lake or whatever, and they stop at the docks and go have a meal and go back and put their boat on a trailer and go home. So I can see that. I'd like to see some statistics and, financials for our current year usage on our marina, because in the past it has sat with transient usage, considerably unused from the figures we had several years ago when we were talking about going to some seasonal slips. So I'd kind of like to see where that is so we have a general idea. 3.3 million into that. I don't know if these improvements would allow us to increase any of the rates that we currently charge for that. If that doesn't sound like, all the improvements are going to help much with rates we currently charge, that kind of seems like a bit of a deterrent. And I know Ryan had some interest about the projected payback on it as well, and on the investment for that. It's kind of hard to justify this for me as well, and putting the amount of money into it that we're talking about for something that loses $200,000 to $300,000 a year. If we could find a way, that could generate some more use for it, or if we were open to having some more seasonal slips that could help increase the income, which I'm not sure that they have done, then I could maybe see warranting some of the costs that are associated with that. But I'd like to see the statistics and financials for what we've had in the past year or so since we've talked about this the last time, so we kind of have an idea of where we stand on this.
One thing, if I might, on that note, the length of the slips and the overall linear footage of docks I mentioned was going to increase by about 35%, and typically that would increase your revenue by about the same because you're going to charge more for a longer slip. You're going to charge more for a longer transient boat to stay there. So even though there's 40 slips now and going to be 39, the linear footage is up, 35%. So you should see additional revenue. The other part that we always get into when we talk about marinas and communities and talking about the revenue that they generate and does it pay off the maintenance and the replacement, is thinking of it more like a park. And how many parks do we have that don't generate any revenue? And so what this is, waterfront city property that you're a steward of, and you're able to maintain that for the public, and for the public's access to the waterfront. So in doing that, you're able to do that because you can generate some revenue to pay off those slips. And so as a good steward and recognizing actually the economic impact to the city by those boaters, when you look at it as a whole, it makes a lot of sense. If you look at it as what's the income from the slips and how much do the slips cost, it's really easy to look at that and think it's not a good idea. So just thought I'd add that to it.
I can understand that and the justification for the investment, but on the other hand, I don't have a lot of parks around town that I put $3.3 million into.
Very true, very true.
And I don't want that, number to float out there, losing $200,000 to $300,000 a year. The total cost of running the marina is about $350,000, and, without the boat launch, we'll take in, north of $200,000. So, I don't know that it doesn't lose any $200,000 or $300,000 a year, tens of thousands probably, yeah, operations, but it doesn't include the capital.
I was just looking back into the numbers that we had from when we looked at this, when we were talking about going from some transient to some seasonals. I believe there was a pretty substantial number per year that we had seen in that presentation that we had looked at. I know it was close to 300,000 one year.
Yeah, but I don't, I think maybe we're getting some things mixed up because we did split out the boat launch, this year when we put the budget together. So looking at it, we're projecting 227 in revenues and 340 in expenses at the marina.
Let's just say, I'd kind of like to see the updated numbers for it if we could, so that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this year's budget. So yeah, we do have to get the updated numbers from this summer so we can see how the transient switch impacted our revenue stream. The boat launch, the marina has never been a good business venture. And if we don't want to have a marina anymore, or we want to start backing out of it, that's a long-range strategic change in the way we do things, because we've got grant obligations hanging out there, so we'll have to find out how to start getting out of it. I mean, we've been subsidizing it and very intentionally to bring in that that transient traffic that brings economic benefit to our businesses locally and a lot of interest to our waterfront. If there's going to be a change in that, we should start talking about that and find ways, and not improving it probably isn't a good strategy. To let it get bad is probably not a good strategy. So I'm a little bit leery, and I really don't think we're going to find a better time. And if the city council doesn't want to go after this now, I need to hear that, and we'll find other alternatives, which I don't think we're going to see a time when we're going to see greater access to federal and state funding than what we might see in the next couple of years. I don't know that you're going to get a better look at it anytime soon.
Just some more questions I have.
I agree.
You all set?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess that a couple questions. The emphasis seems to be on shovel-ready projects, something that's ready to submit now, as opposed to things that are kind of in the thinking stages. Is that correct? And they must be related to tourism and outdoor recreation?
Correct, yeah, they're looking for things that have already been thought out, studied, estimated, or ready to go. And again, there's that 25% that has to go to recreation projects. So that's why the EDA kind of liked this one, is it's recreation, but there is an economic benefit to it.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out why we've narrowed down to these particular projects, because we obviously have needs around town. We'd love to have a lot of money to spend on, but it sounds like a really narrow set of options here. I share the skepticism about marina expenditures. If we can make it more profitable, or at least losing less money, then there's probably benefit, because as you say, we have a lot of investment there and long-term investment, so walking away from it is a poor option. I kind of like the idea of the linear park restoration. I think that we ought to stabilize that as best we can. I think that we can do that without compromising other things that are going to happen on the island, because by and large we're trying to stabilize the shoreline so it stops washing away. We do know the water will eventually come back up, so better to take care of things now. The boat launch, I think, is a good idea. I guess my question, for two questions for either you or Pat, is one, are these projects going to be submitted as a single submission or 3 separate projects? In other words, are these separable? As if you get one approved and not another, or if you get all 3 approved?
The intent would be to submit them as one big project, and I don't know how they would score it, if they might come back with some options, not complete funding, if they like one bit of it better than another bit of it. But we thought we'd go in and ask for all 3. Now, that's not a decision you have to make today, whether or not you accept that, but if an offer came through, at that point, there'd be a decision point to appropriate our share and on the if-come of these other grants, because those would be possibilities, and we would start softening up those grant administrators and let them know what we're working on and start getting their feelings about the likelihood we'd get coastal zone management or waterways money. But in the meantime, you know, it would be something you guys would be asked to commit to probably first quarter next year.
Well, so then that's the other half of the question. If we have trouble coming up with matching funds, and it's a significant amount of money, we say, well, we could match for 2 of the 3 projects, or not all 3, or something like that. At that point, is it, you've submitted all 3 as a single project, so you either do it all or you forfeit the entire appropriation. Is that the case? And what does happen if we say, we get approved for these, and we've decided that we can't get the grants, and we don't want to bond, and so on. And so do we disqualify ourselves from future grant opportunities?
I doubt that. I think we would, I've not been through that, so I don't know if you'd be able to. Typically, if you get a grant offer, when we apply for a grant and they come through and say, you know, we'd like to fund you $300,000 on a Michigan Natural Resource Trust Fund grant, if we were to retreat a little bit and say, well, we've cut back on our expectations, they're okay with backing off. You can't add on. But backing off, they'd be okay, and they would reallocate that money to other projects. So I think they would be friendly about that.
Okay.
So, you know, and it happens. I'm sure there are many communities that start going and have big aspirations and get to the point that they then have to cut back. Maybe construction costs go way up, or they miss something in their initial planning. They find additional costs, and they have to adjust. So they're good at being agile about that, as good as we are.
Well, that makes me feel better about the whole process then, if we have some ability to, if we can't come up with matching funds, or it's going to be an excess burden on us, that we have some options there. So.
And I'm hearing the concerns, and we can fill in these blanks and get more data and information and certainty. We're early in the process. It's just sort of the level we're at now. We don't have all that data, and we really don't want to start charging into it unless we feel like City Council is comfortable with going together with it, you know, going in on a pretty major reinvestment in the Harbor Island perimeter projects. I guess we could call it that. We're not looking at the interior. There's just the outside perimeter, and possibly with some of the restoration and remediation we end up doing, we might end up going in and be able to do some of this work as part of that. You know, we really don't know what that's going to look like.
All right.
Pat, when we were talking to Lee that day, you said Harbor Island perimeter because you were trying to pitch him on the whole idea of doing Harbor Island. He said, set your application up like the interior of Harbor Island, maybe an ask 2 years down the road, and this sets the stage for it, these initial projects. So that was actually part of the conversation with the EDA.
Okay. So, Pat, are you looking for a specific approval from us this evening, or?
You know, I said, I was looking for affirmation, like, yeah, we should start, you know, get the wheels going and plan on applying for this. And if it seems like there's not enthusiasm for it, then we may not be as enthusiastic. Maybe we only ask for the boat launch or only the marina. But, you know, I guess maybe I need to put something on the October 4th agenda to get a vote to move forward or not move forward. I think we should probably not just go forward on staff asking for project money that isn't being supported by the elected body.
Okay.
I'm willing to move forward on all of them, but the simple fact is that if it comes up to a point that we don't want to do one of them, we can always back out on it. So better off to ask for all than try and get something.
Well, that was why I asked the question, can we?
That's what he was saying.
Can we drop something off so then we're not harmed ourselves?
Yes.
Okay, well, on that basis, I would agree with Mike. Fritz?
I'm okay with it too.
Yeah, as long as we have an option to look at the information and at some point in time down the road say, you know, we don't have the means or ways to support this one, but let's drop that one out and do some others, then I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Okay, is that enough for you then?
You?
Sure is.
Okay.
Well, I think it needs to be more than just that. I think it needs to be thinking about how do we make our marina more profitable, what kind of, how are we going to increase revenue on some of those slips that are getting some of this benefit. Pat, you're shaking your head when Mike was asking if there's, you know, additional revenue opportunities there. You didn't think that there were for higher slip rates. You know, the community, I think, is going to have a hard time saying, hey, you guys are going to go look at, you guys did this infrastructure millage. We've talked about pay-as-you-go type strategies, and I get that this is, you know, a large amount of federal dollars to leverage, but this is, you know, hey, You're gonna need bonds to, the community to take on debt to support the marina and support some of these projects. They might have a, tough time and be in our ear on that. I think some of them already are. So, I mean, it's just thinking through some of that, because you know what, we may need more to leverage additional infrastructure and dollars that may be coming down the way. So, so it's just thinking about a bigger picture than, just the application. I'm not saying you're not, because I think that you are. You're thinking multiple steps ahead. You're being very upfront that, hey, we don't have the full match probably, This is part of, hey, when we start running our general fund down like we have, here we are. Well, we have the matching dollars and we don't. So.
By extending the length of the slips also brings in a lot more revenue for us too. I mean, put a bigger boat in there, they pay a lot more, so.
Well, are we gonna charge the fishermen more though? That's the question.
If by foot, Mike had made a good point, Mo Free, when he said that if we extend the slips, we do charge by foot. So if we're able to put bigger boats in there, and there's a higher demand for those larger boats and those slips, we will get more revenue that way. He said 35%, I think that's pretty optimistic. I like his optimism. So I'd like to think, but we're down a slip or two, so I think it would balance out. Maybe we come out a little bit ahead, but we're really not adding a big critical mass of revenue potential. We're still gonna have more or less the same revenue potential. It's still gonna be a subsidy. I guess the point that I'm not making very well is I see the alternative being about every third or fourth year, we might qualify for about $500,000 from waterways if we do really well. And 3 years ago, we had $3 million worth of capital needs. So I'm feeling a little bit of need to find other sources like EDA money, or, the alternative isn't that we just somehow make more money off it. We can try to attract more boaters, but the boating industry, from what I'm told, I've talking to boaters and listening to the waterways consultants, and I guess Tony and Mike have some experience in other areas of the state. Grand Haven's a bit of a model of a preferred place to go. We do quite well with our occupancy rates compared to many other marinas. So I don't know that there's a lot of upside to finding creative ways to. I'd love to know what they are. We're always looking for ways to get more people in there and up our occupancy. We tried to shift slips to seasonal from transient, and we got slapped back a little bit by the State Waterways Commission last year. You remember I don't remember how many we asked for. We asked for 14, and they gave us 7 maybe? 5, yeah. So we're talking about going back to that well, but we still have to find out, did that make more money for us? But if it did, it didn't make tens of thousands of dollars. It might have made $5,000 or $8,000 more here, which is great. It still doesn't flip that script to profitability.
But then again, if you look at what it does for the community itself, bringing people in here, and not only does it give jobs at the marina there, but it also gives jobs at the restaurants, the downtown merchants, as they walk around our area there, they spend the money here. And the economic impact, as Mike was saying earlier, is what you got to look at also, what's good for the community. I mean, if we subsidize a little bit of something to make the community that much better, or even have much more affluence, it's better off for us. That's what we're here for. We're supposed to help the service of our community. So if it does that, if the economic numbers come in saying that's what it does, we're doing a good job of helping out our community by giving jobs out there, getting people to come here and influence it. So you have to look at other ways too. You just can't look at what's Marina make, what does the marina do also for the rest of the community?
I specifically mentioned the economic benefit when I was mentioning my comments. That's part of the equation here, but.
I can do some work on that, though. I'm hearing the concerns, and before we get to the point where you'd be asked to pull the trigger, we'll have an awful lot more data coming your way, and I think a better peace of mind so you feel good about it. And we need to be very transparent and make sure we're letting people know that we're talking about this and hear from the taxpayers. If they feel like it's something they don't want to see us going after, maybe they'll start letting us know that. So we'll keep talking about it and start the wheels turning on the applications and see what we can. That's what you want us to do, is beat the bushes and find other people's money whenever we can. So that's what we're trying to do here, and we'll bring that forward and try to get you the confidence you need to make the decision when the time comes.
Okay. All right, so are we done then?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
This isn't something we're voting on this evening. Correct. This is general direction for staff. All right, well, thank you, and this concludes our continuation of our work session. So that brings us to our consent agenda.
This is to approve council minutes for the special work session and regular city council meeting of September 7th, 2021. To approve the bills memo in the amount of $4,267,993.98. To approve a resolution to approve a change to the Grand Haven Area Community Land Trust bylaws, increasing the number of CLT board members from 5 to 7. And to approve a special event request to hold the Chowdown Centertown to be held on October 16th, 2021 from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. on 7th Street, Washington Avenue, and in parking lots 12 and 13.
All right, I need a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Fritz, second by Dora. Questions on any items on the consent agenda?
No questions, but I just wanted to, as I say every time it comes up, is out of the 4.2 million, the 3.2 million is actually the taxes that we disperse out to other places, so it's kind of like a pass-through again, so it doesn't look like we have that much of big of a bill.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Ready to vote?
Fritz,
Yes.
Dora,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Manetza.
Yes. All right, first item of new business.
This is to approve an annual agreement extension with the Mulligan's Hollow Ski Bowl Association for ski bowl operations and waive the requirement for an ice rink operation for the coming winter season to be reviewed each year at renewal. Administration recommends approval.
All right, need a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Dora, second by Cummins. Pat, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, we do have a 10-year agreement that we're in I think this is the second renewal under that 10-year agreement. And when I met with them to talk about the renewal, they said, well, they were really hoping they could not do the ice rink this year. They did it last year, spent hundreds of volunteer hours on it, and told me they got maybe 2 or 3 good days of skating last year. The sun comes out, it gets mushy, the kids run around on it, they can't keep them off there, it gets very, very difficult. And it's just been the current, period we're in, it seems to be warmer winters and very hard to hold ice down there. They showed a very keen interest in talking to us about maybe doing a refrigerated surface at some point and trying to pool our resources and find a way to get something that could be reliable. But they said for now they're really draining their volunteers. Their volunteers have to get out there at 11:30 at night when it gets cold enough and start getting the water on there, and they go till 1 or 2 in the morning, and that's tough volunteer work to find, but they've been doing it. They've been living up to their end of the bargain, and they tried desperately, but again, last year it was just a few days worth of skating, and it just seemed overwhelming to just get that little bit. So I said, well, if you want to change like that, I need to bring that to council's attention and put it on the agenda, because we were very clear when we did the original deal with the Ski Bowl Association that part of the package was them taking care of the ice rink along with the ski hill. And they've been very committed to living out that commitment. And each year they've talked to us about it. They said, man, it sure is a hassle and we hardly get any skating. And each year we've said, well, you got to do it. We need to have at least one ice rink in town. And I think this year they finally wore me down. I paid attention last year and looked at it, and it was rough. That thing was not used. I never saw kids skating on it last year. They told me they got a couple good days of skating. So I thought for this year, and they said, let's just look at it year to year. And if we're able to, if the climate is cyclical, it's probably, if we get a real cold winter this year and we say, darn it, we should have been running it, then next year we put the skating rink back in. But they would like to go forward without running the skating rink and see how it goes this year. But and I encouraged them to set up a Saturday again when you guys can all go down and get a little tour of the place, because it's exciting when you go down there and see what they've done. Each year they make different improvements, and I trust them to allocate their volunteer resources as best they can. So, I'd like this to get approved, and then the agreement will change a little bit where they don't have to do the ice rink, and each year we will review that at renewal time.
So we would look at this again next year at this time?
I think next year when we sat down with them, we'd talk about it, and if it was still not worth trying to do if we have another winter this winter like we've been having, we'd just agree to not make them do the ice rink. I think it's time to admit it. I think Mike's told me about the ice rinks that we used to have 3 or 4 around town that the city put together, and we used city staff time to do it, but we had ice cold winters from December through the end of February, and now we just don't have it. So the city long ago decided we can't do this anymore. It's just not worth it. We spend so much staff time and nobody uses it. So I don't know if it's really fair to expect a bunch of volunteers to do it if we've decided we can't do it. So I would expect that, I don't know that I'd bring it back each year. I think each year at renewal we'd talk about it. I'd report back to council what the upshot was, and so this would be the first time we weren't requiring them to do that. They made that request this year.
Any other changes in the conditions of the agreement?
None at all.
Yeah, I used to do those ice skating rinks. My dad was in charge of most of it all, along with H.N. Christensen. And we had Ferry School, Mary White, Elliott School. They had one over at Ferrysburg Fire Barn. You had one at Grand Haven Township, where they used to have the rink out there. Then you also had 2 rinks down at the Hollow down there. You had a hockey rink and you had a regular general purpose. But last year I did notice that it did actually, it was very difficult for them. With the climate change and what's going on now, I don't think you'll see too much of it. If we do, it's going to be, hit or miss. But there's a special way of doing those things down there. I did them for probably about 20 years or so. But only thing I want to do is to stress to this organization is the spraying of the trees. And when I know they spray out there and the trees get really overtaxed, and there's the ones that are holding the hill there for us. So they got to make sure that when they do their icing and that out there for the snow for their snow, is that to be very careful not to get the trees again. They've done it every year, and we have to remind them of it. So I want to make sure that they be very more conscious of our trees that we have along the perimeter to hold those hills in.
Anything else?
No, otherwise that's not a problem.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just because I don't know, and this is the first time I've seen this, I don't know all the history and all that, so that's all good information. So this is an association board, they're set up, and they're a group of volunteers that collect the revenues, it looks like, and how does all this pay structure work? This is another area where we lose money on it, but again, there's economic value to bringing people here during the winter and those types of things, but just curious how it all, briefly.
Briefly, we ran it as a city operation for decades, and it got to a point where we were losing some money on it. So the YMCA took over and ran it for a handful of years maybe, and we had to subsidize them. We would, when I first got here, we'd send them $20,000 each year to make up for their losses, and of course they always showed us tremendous losses. And then the Ski Bowl Association came along and said, well, what if we were to run it? You don't have to pay anything, and we'll just charge what needs to be charged. We'll run it with volunteers and make it work. And we said, well, let's give it a try, and we entered into this agreement, and we don't subsidize it other than helping to pay for the water. And I could get that number for you. I don't have it right in front of me, but we do help pay for the water. But other than that, it's, they employ everybody, they take care of everything. We own all the equipment, we own everything. We own the building. Any equipment they buy is technically city-owned. They have an advisory committee that is the chairperson, the president, and the secretary that technically are appointed by the city. They're an advisory committee that I appoint, and that makes them under the city's liability umbrella. And so we do keep an eye on how they employ people. We require them to use, standard employment practices and take, steps to minimize risk. But they've done a great job for us. We're able to stay out from under having to pay what it would cost to run a ski facility of that size, and they make it work and continue to plow money back into it. They've really made some nice improvements. They bought a new groomer a couple years ago that I think was a $200,000 piece of equipment that they bought, all with fundraising. They built a new garage out there, and they buy new snow equipment and keep the ropes up and do everything, and our staff doesn't have to help with any of that, and it's considerable. So
yeah, so we're to be definitely thankful for. So it's Mulligan's Hollow as a whole that we have a $50,000, I think, on there.
Oh, yeah, that's
So,
the
so
running
none of it's
part.
related to ski bowl, it's all,
Right,
portion's all good to
Right,
go.
yeah, yeah.
Well, that's important to know. That's good information. Thank you.
It is well used as well, and you go out there on a Saturday afternoon, and, I mean, there's literally hundreds of people going up and down those hills from, you know, I would imagine 5 and 6 year olds all the way up to 50 and 60 year olds, so it is an asset and it is well used.
I think they're doing a better job than the city did it. I think they're doing a fantastic job out there with Mulligan's Hollow right now, the ski.
You know, I worked out there, now be careful.
Yeah.
You know, maybe we gotta let the boaters run the marina, and
Yeah,
that thing would turn
well,
right around.
I worked out there too, Mike,
I
but
used
it's
to pack
still,
the hills.
They do it as
yeah,
volunteers.
they're still doing a better job than what we used to do with it.
Well, I think that without the Ski Bowl Association picking up the work and doing all the fundraising, the work, everything they do, we wouldn't have a ski bowl. I think that's about as simple as that, so.
Yep.
Very pleased that they're here, that they're willing to keep doing it, they're willing to take all this extra work. I think the ice rink operation is a waste of their time and energy, so I'm fully in favor of renewing this with this condition in it. Anything else?
Ready to vote?
Let's vote.
Scott,
Yes.
Fritz,
Yes.
Dora,
Yes,
Cummins,
Yes.
Manetza.
Yes. All right, next item.
Is to approve a revised notice of intent to issue up to $28 million in electric revenue bonds to disassemble and demolish the city's existing Sims plant and conduct environmental and general remediation and mitigation of the existing site, construct or renovate a system substation, acquire and install automated meters, and make other improvements to the system, publish the notice of intent, appoint PFM as the financial advisor for the revenue bonds, appoint Dickinson Wright to serve as bond counsel, and rescind any other resolutions that conflict with this resolution. Administration recommends approval.
All right, I need a motion.
So moved. Oh, go ahead, Denny.
I think I heard Fritz first, so motion by Fritz, second by Scott. All right, so Ed, do you want to speak to this? Should I call on Dave?
Dave was here. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, he's still here. He
moved up to the front
he just
row.
moved up to the front row.
Sometimes every time I look, he's getting a little closer. I was getting nervous. This, I think you've been anticipating this. Most all of you, if you haven't been at the meetings, you've been watching the meetings and reading the minutes and paying very rapt attention to how this has been progressing. So I believe you were expecting to see this on the agenda for the benefit of the public. This was a kind of a coming at this from a slightly different direction than had previously been done. A notice of intent was originally approved in March of 2020 on a different project. We can call that the original project. Well, now they've reformatted and come back with a different project. I call this the new project. And so earlier this evening, you took an item off the agenda that was the final bond authorization for that other original project, and now you're looking at a notice of intent that will start a clock ticking. There's a waiting period of 45 days, I believe, followed by a time that you will be presented again with a bond authorization agreement down the road, as well as other actions that you'll need to be taken during this process. So I'm sure Dave can answer any other questions if you have any.
Okay, Dave, did you have anything you wanted to add to that at this point?
Make it short.
Just a little comment, a little nuance on that. I think that Pat summed it up very well. For the most part, this isn't it's a revised project, and actually both notices of intent will be effective. So the old notice of intent, and the rationale there is we spent significant amounts of money under the bond anticipation note that was under that initial project, the portions of the project that we've all agreed to and we've gone forward with. Now we're revising other elements of the project that we have not yet done, but we still have about $13 million of the bond anticipation notes that will be refunded as part of this project. So technically this is a second notice of intent for a single project with a revised definition. And part of this definition actually says it's the stuff that we've already completed on the first part of the project. So it's just, I think it's a little difficult, but I think when you look at the project definition as it's been revised, what we've taken out, I think it's consistent with the intentions of everybody involved over the last month and a half.
Okay, so when you say that this is under both notices of intent, it's because the bond anticipation notes were issued under the prior one, and they're being rolled into this one effectively.
Correct. And if you remember, what also is part of this resolution is it allows us to actually start spending the bond proceeds before we issue the bonds. So there's a reimbursement clause in there that allows certain portions of the project that if we start moving forward with stuff now in good faith, and we sell the bond 6 months from now, we can reimburse ourselves for those items. That was part of the original notice of intent as well. So we went forward and invested or spent money before we issued the bond anticipation notes. Then we issued the bond anticipation notes, spent more money. So the idea is when we sell these bonds, the bonds will be utilized to refund ourselves for all of those items that were, for most of the items that were in the bond anticipation notes, plus the items that we're spending between now and when the actual bonds do get sold.
And just for clarity, those items that are in the current or the new project definition are the ones that were just read off by Ashley as part of our motion.
Correct.
Okay.
And the key thing there is for the audience and for the public, the items that have been removed from the project are probably the most important things, and that's the generation component and the facilities on Harbor Island, and then also the snowmelt equipment. Now, that doesn't mean that the snowmelt equipment is going to get removed and not paid. It's just going to get paid for in a different fashion, and we'll have to talk about how that gets funded. But essentially, the original snowmelt project as defined was part of a combined heat and power plant that was included in the project, and now that portion of the project has been removed, so the snowmelt equipment has been removed as well.
Okay. It's just not being bonded in this manner.
Correct.
And then there was today there was a couple of corrections on the
yeah, I think there was a
date.
Pat caught, it was a good catch, that Pat caught that there was a reference to the previous notice of intent being March 20th, and it was actually March 2nd. So we've made that change. And then there was a question about, since Linda wasn't here tonight, who the appropriate person is to sign the resolution. The resolution that you're passing tonight, it's whoever's the acting clerk can ratify the approval of the resolution. But what actually gets posted, the notice that's posted is actually will be under the signature of the board secretary, Renee Molyneux.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, questions for either Pat or Dave?
I guess I just think I didn't completely follow the other one's still in effect. This is the second notice of intent. Just, real simple for me.
So, and maybe it's helpful to understand where we were in the bond process and where we're actually going back to. So, if you remember, the process is we issue a notice of intent. It says this is the project, and we originally did that for up to $75 million for a defined project that included all of the redevelopment on Harbor Island. And we progressed with that project. Now, part of that initial phase was we weren't sure everything that was going to get included, so we went and we borrowed some money for primarily the demolition, for the substation reconstruction, and some of the initial environmental remediation, and then actually our AMI installations were also paid for in that bond anticipation note. So that went forward, and we did all of those, and we issued the bond anticipation note for some of the project, and we also paid for some of the projects with cash, and we could, if we chose to later on, reimburse ourselves for that cash with bond proceeds. So that was the initial process, and then we got to the point of actually allowing for approval of the bonds, which was actually the bond resolution that we call. This isn't really a bond resolution, this is just approval of the notice of intent. So now we're getting to the point of saying, okay, the project changed enough, and this was a call by the bond council, is we could have just taken items out of the project and issued a lower amount of bonds. the thought process is that that we actually changed the project enough from the original notice of intent. And you remember we had those long discussions when we originally passed the notice of intent, what could be built, what couldn't be built under that project. Bond counsel has basically said that we've now changed the project by removing these items enough where we really should go back to the public and just say, we want to make sure, public, that you're understanding of what we're going to issue bonds for and the maximum amount. So what we're doing is we're just going back and revising that original notice of intent and reposting it for another referendum period before we actually go forward to sell bonds, so that no one is questioning that we didn't give the opportunity to the public to weigh in. Now, if, for instance, if now the public said, well, geez, we want to hold a referendum on whether you bond these projects or not, we're really in a quandary if they say, well, we don't approve those project portions that you've already spent. All right, so that notice that we previously approved in January, we did operate in good faith, and that doesn't have to really be reinitiated because the referendum period was completed, and we lived by that notice of intent for the last year and a half. So we aren't really issuing a new notice of intent for new bonds. We're kind of revising the old notice of intent to update the public on what we are going to continue to go forward with, and the amount is obviously going down substantially from the 75 million down to 28. So I'm not bond counsel. I don't like these definitions and stuff like that, and he did asked if he wanted to be here. I think we kind of felt, well, this is kind of redoing the process that we've already done. But I think it's important for everyone to realize that we're going forward with this. It's kind of a follow through of the process that we're already involved in. It's not like restarting a whole nother project. Does that make it a little clearer?
I think so. You're just like I said, you're revising the project elements and noticing the public that, hey, the old project elements are being replaced with these project elements, which some are the same, some are new, some are clearly different.
And the other thing that we might want to add is there's also some added elements to the project. Mm-hmm. And the rationale there is we aren't adding any projects to our 5-year capital plan. So if you look at our 5-year capital plan that was approved in May, there's and I'm doing this number by memory, and I should have checked it before I came here, but it was about $85 million. All right, so there's $85 million in this 5-year capital plan that we were going to bond about $45 million of. All right, and the problem with doing all this stuff is when we're really looking at funding that entire capital plan, we're actually looking at rates adequate to recover an amount and then bonds to cover an amount. And we really, for the most part, don't care whether we use this dollar for this part of the project or this dollar for that part of the project. What we're looking at is really funding the entire capital project. And we didn't in the original project include some elements of our distribution system that we were planning on doing anyway. All right, we were just planning on using cash. Well, looking at this project now, what we're a bit concerned about is spending the entire bond proceeds in the 3-year window that's allotted. All right, so once we sell bonds, we essentially have 3 years to spend these dollars. And what we were concerned about, and what council was concerned about, and us as well, after talking to them, is that if we broaden the definition a little bit to allow some of these other items that we were planning on doing and paying cash for into the bond project, that would allow us to spend the bond proceeds in the 3 years on those elements of the project, and then particularly if the monies that we had set aside for remediation efforts, which we aren't really sure how quickly they're going to be spent, given the fact of the uncertainty of the island, that would allow us to slide some of those other projects in, spend the money, and then save the money, the cash for those more uncertain terms after the 3 years. So it gives us, really you have to look at this entire bond process as a funding for this entire capital improvement plan, and what we are essentially doing is transitioning away from a power plant to more investment in our distribution system, and there's some transition costs that we have in the interim that are too much to just fund with regular with regular, revenues, that we need this infusion of cash in the short term. And what we're also looking at doing that we haven't made a decision on is shortening that bond, that when we go down to this lower amount, we're going to give serious consideration to go into a shorter bond as well, maybe a 10-year versus a 20-year. And that will allow us to basically spend less on issuance costs as well. When we get into that shorter time frame of bond, it's more like a bank loan than a traditional bond. It's still, tax exempt bond, but you typically don't need a rating. You can go and negotiate more terms, and that lowers your issuance costs, and might raise your interest rate just a little bit, but it allows for different avenues to sell bonds that might save us some money in the course. But we haven't, again, we're very early in the stages here, so that's why some of those provisions are up to amounts. We actually do think that the bond will be closer to that $24-25 million range. That 45 minus the 20 that we take out, I think we'll be closer to that 24-25 range. But again, there's some flexibility in there so that we can potentially, fund some of the other projects and take some of the cash and leave it in the bank, or various options that we want to look at over the next 6 months and make sure that before we actually bring a bond resolution to you, that and it still says in there that it's up to 35 years, but actually we're looking at probably a much shorter bond now that since its life is, that the amount is less. So there's still a lot of things that we need to decide. I think there was a discussion at our board on I don't know exactly what portions of water we're going to look at and what exactly we're funding and what exact amounts are there. I think we will before you actually have a bond resolution, we'll put more clarity into the exact issue and the amount and the term and all those types of things as we go forward.
So you're like similar to last time, going to have like a project list showing the cost of each item that you're planning on actually.
And we will do that, and we'll also update the rest of our capital improvement plan so that you can see exactly what we're doing over the next 5 years and what portions are being bonded and what portions are being not bonded, and then potentially what flexibility we have to interchange those parts. But I think at this point in time, our capital plan is not changed in the last 5-6 months, with the exception of the removal of those items on the island. The other thing that we are, I might want to add, is one other thing that we did talk about is we are still anticipating some facilities needs as far as building, and we did approve, the board did approve using Progressive A&E to kind of look at the available buildings out there, look at some vacant sites, look at some development, and also re-looking at what portions of our existing operations on Eaton might move out and what might stay. Maybe a little bit different than what we had proposed in the original kind of split between the two sites. That might change a little bit. So that's why we took that element out of the project, because there was uncertainty with it. And that was one of the things that bond counsel did say, is that if we put that portion of the project in for the bonds, we would have to put quite a bit more definition around it, like we did in the original bond notices. If you're going to build generation, if you're going to build buildings and facilities and that type of thing, that we know where it's located, what type of technology we're using, those types of things. And we really aren't, similar to your discussion that you had here earlier about what projects can you apply to a certain funding source, we didn't have enough definition in that particular project. So we would look at funding that portion of our capital plan with cash, and then moving some of those other elements into the bonds. So it gives us a little bit more flexibility again there of what we spend bonds for and what we don't.
Thank you, sir. I think you're redoing your capital plan, putting that out there with the things that you just mentioned as far as, removing the.
They're all in the capital plan now, but before we issue bonds, we'll identify more clearly, this plan that we're working on. But again, at this point in time, all we're doing is re-noticing this project with these changes so that the public then has an opportunity to review what we're doing and determine whether they want to call for a referendum or not. And there's a 45-day referendum period that is allowed for the public to do that. We went through that once. we're gonna go through it again. And I think for the most part, what we've tried to do is kind of remove the controversial elements so that hopefully the community can get around the elements that are left in there and you know, we can move forward. Because we do need to, our goal is to issue this debt preferably yet this year. All right, so we get through that 45-day period, we lower the amount, we can use maybe some of these mechanisms that we can get to the market quicker. And it does appear that the market is going away from us a little bit. Inflation is setting in, interest rates are going up a bit. So to the extent that we can move this process as quickly as we can, I think that's part of what we're trying to do as well. So,
Nope, I think it's good. Quicker you show that plan to folks and this notice of intent gets out and everybody can see where the numbers are going for what things, I think, without the controversial piece, I think it'll be a smooth process, so.
Yeah. Anyone else have questions? I guess I would have to say that I'm satisfied with the revised project list and the upper limits and outer bounds of the notice of intent. And basically, you're describing a box that everything has to fit into and nothing else be put in.
I think there was one other blank on the copy that you've seen, and I don't know, Pat, if you had an opportunity, but there's a section in there that talks about reimbursements. And again, this goes to not just necessarily reimbursing the bands, but also other items that we potentially have done before the element. And there's a blank there, and I think we would insert that previous notice of intent had 17 million in there. I think we would insert 14 million into that blank.
Right, that's what I saw in the email earlier today.
Right.
So is that in our resolution?
That didn't know what, right now the band the outstanding amount on the bands is about 13.2 million. So you know we might not pay 100% of that amount off with the bonds. We might pay some of that off with cash and then insert. But that 14 million would be the upper limit of the bond proceeds that we could use to pay for things that have already been done.
Okay, and so let our minutes record that 14 million is inserted in the resolution.
Yeah, we did that earlier today. We got it all buffed up and ready to go, so.
Okay, I'm looking at a copy that had a blank there, so I wrote 14 million here.
Good.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone? We ready to vote?
Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. All right, thank you. All right, next item.
To approve an adjustment to the general fund budget due to transitions in the city clerk's office in 2021, increasing the expenses in that department from $263,150 to $308,820. Administration recommends approval.
All right, need a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Scott, second by Cummins. They're kind of tied, but I'll do it. We'll do it that way. Okay, Pat, do you want to explain this?
Sure. The bottom line is that a few things were overlooked during the budget process with transitions in the office and payouts at the end of the career there, and new staff coming on. This is the worst case scenario. We need to make sure we have enough in there to cover the possibility that we hire somebody on and they get started, and we've got a little bit of overlap there. So it just, when the wage worksheets were submitted, those variables were not taken into account. We were looking at it and we said, this doesn't add up, we're going to have to add more, so that's why we brought it back to you for an adjustment.
Okay, any questions?
Well, it's good, I think, to hear that there's going to be some overlap, all right, so that the new person hopefully coming on will get some training from our current clerk. So.
Anything else? Ready to vote?
Good.
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. All right, first item of unfinished business.
This is to approve a special event for the Berserk Brewing Oktoberfest to be held on Washington Avenue on Saturday, October 9th from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. allowing amplified music until 10 p.m. and alcohol consumption. Administration recommends approval.
All right, I need a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Fritz, second by Cummins. All right, we postponed this from our last meeting due to concerns about public input and feedback and awareness of the neighbors. And Tyler, would you like to address this a little bit?
Yeah, so definitely, yep.
Give
I'm
us your-
Tyler Forbes, my wife Karen Forbes here, we're with Berserk Brewing Company, with the owners. And I wanted to first apologize for not attending the previous meeting in person. I just out of habit, it didn't even dawn on me that we could attend in person. We sat there and watched it live on Facebook and tried to respond, and we're used to the Zoom meetings, so I apologize for that. A couple things I wanted to address really quickly was it seemed like just yesterday we were here getting, approval to start our business, and it's already been a year. We opened during the pandemic in a time that, that most of the winter we couldn't even serve inside. So for a restaurant or a bar or a brewery, that's pretty tough. We pivoted really quickly and we did some unique things, and we made it work. Our community and our customers made sure we survived and we thrived. We're looking to hold a 1-year anniversary celebration. We're calling it an Oktoberfest style party, basically to say thanks to our customers and our community and give our East Siders a small festival that they can sort of make their own. I'm also sorry for what seems like short notice, but we did start with this at a temporary use permit on the side of the building, as was mentioned earlier, that we should have it on that side lot on the east side of Sign Factory. We did attempt to do that initially a couple months ago, and that fell through because you can't put a tent between those buildings because of fire lanes. So talking to James Kibbert from GHPSD, he basically walked through that with us, and we found out there'd be no way possible to put an event on the side of that and have a tent. We really wanted to have a tent so that it covered for adverse weather and just in general for sun during the daytime. And so we shifted over to the special event permit, and we wanted to have a tent and shut down the very end of the Washington Street. And we addressed it with most of the business members on that end of the street, and we're not going to adversely affect anybody's business on that end of the street. Nobody's parking lots will be blocked. Initially, there was an issue with City Farmer, with Kevin. He didn't quite understand that we weren't going to block his parking lot, and he was very concerned about that, not shutting down the entire street because it's a busy day for him, and we understood that. Hence why we made sure that the blockade is going to start past his parking lot, and we only wanted from there to the end of the street. And so we talked about it earlier this week, and I think he addressed the council and someone else this week, perhaps maybe Pat knows. But he says now that he's good with it, and actually he's going to take advantage of it a little bit, and he's going to put decorations under the tent if it's a go, and he wants to sell pumpkins and things out front on the edge of the edge of his parking lot. So he's going to take advantage of it a little bit, which is what it's there for. I did want to say also, oops, dropped a sheet here. Sorry about that. Here it is. Yeah, it wasn't possible. I did work directly this time with the GHPSD, with James Kibbert, and to make the plan for the street party for the special event permit, and we made sure that we had the fire lane access and everything else that we needed, the exits, everything that he wants to make sure that we could do this successfully. And so there should be no issue there, and he's already basically told me that he would approve that based on what we discussed. There were also many alternative ideas in the previous meeting that I didn't really get to address directly. Things such as moving it down the street or to another area so it was a little more in the business district. Unfortunately, due to our licensing as a manufacturer, a brewery, an MLCC licensing, you have to have these type of events adjoining your property somehow. Otherwise, it raises a whole bunch of other issues. So at this point, we couldn't even entertain that, and we probably never would entertain that because of all the limitations that they would put on it. So this is why we move forward with this. And so again, I apologize for the short notice. We've been trying to adapt and adjust since our first year, really trying to figure this out. So we truly would like to make this happen. It is a one-day event. It's only a portion of the day which will have some music, and it's only at the very end of the street that will be blocked off. And we will be working, like as I said, to advertise all the businesses that are in that area that have helped us to basically
put this on and that would be inconvenienced by it, which all the other businesses on the end of the street will be closed that day anyways, except for us and City Farmer. So that's the only thing that we really considered.
All right, thanks. Any questions for either Tyler or for Pat?
I guess I talked with Kevin today, and he said that he talked with Pat and Chief Hawk, and supposedly they got that issue pretty well settled. He said if they do what they say they're going to do, he's okay with it. So that's okay. How did you plan on playing music all the way till 11 o'clock? Is that correct?
No. Our initial plan was between like 5 to 10 p.m. We now know that there's going to be some breaks. So it could be 4 to 10. But if it's necessary and we needed to stop at 9 and the council recommended that, then we could back it up. And we would just make adjustments for that. But no, we're going to close so that we have time to make like a last call at the beer tent and make sure that everybody's done and cleared out by 11. Because we have to start removing the tent and things like that around 11:30. So we want to be able to clean up and things like that, and we're going to push people to leave at that point. So it'll be done at 11 no matter what.
I've heard from several people down there that concerned about the noise down there. So, and the lady that just came up here about her apartment house right next door, and we have a sound ordinance that starts at 9 o'clock. So I would just, I personally would like to see this, the music stop at 9, and then if you get a lot of complaints down there, I hope you will adjust that music so we don't have people that can't hear their televisions. There's several older people down there that like to listen to ball games and stuff, and if that music's playing over the top of it, they won't be able to enjoy some of that stuff. So they're concerned about that. So I hope you address that. And if you do get a complaint, I hope you take care of that.
We will. One other thing that I didn't have a chance to mention is that we did modify the layout of the original plan was to have things facing to the west. We've moved the stage and we put a backdrop behind the tent to help direct everything to the east. And we modified the entrance to it and everything else so that it would be directed towards the east, which is towards the other businesses and not the houses. So we've shifted all that around, and I think I talked to Mike directly the other day and sort of laid out to him, and I told him we didn't really know how we'd be able to do that. We've worked it out now, and now we can make that happen.
If you can agree to that stuff, I'm okay with it.
Yep.
I don't have a problem at all, to be honest with you. I live right downtown. Let's see, I got Coast Guard Festival, I got the musical fountain, I can make a list of all the noise you want. I mean, it's been my family. I see the house I live has been in our family, I don't know how many years now, probably about 3 or 4 generations. So, but the noise and the way you're setting it up is going to be a good way. If you point the sound to the east, it's going to be great. We talked about this at the last meeting. But I think it's a great opportunity for Grand Haven in an off season to have something started. I really say thank you very much for at least stepping up and trying to do something for the community here and trying to get more people to come into the east side. My big dream at one time was having universities where the Eagle Ottawa plant was there for water resources and that, and make that whole side expand, which never came to fruition. But now we have other businesses that you came in and starting up, and now it's starting to make the community notice more that's on the east side. I live on the west side, but I got family on the east side. I got family in this whole town, so I have to make sure this Grand Haven is Grand Haven, and we have to make sure that Grand Haven as a community works together. So I'm excited about it all. I think you're going to have fun. I always go to German Fest because last name of Fritz, I always go up to Grand Rapids for it, but it'd be nice to have something here that I can do it. So, but yeah, thank you so much, Tyler. I appreciate all your hard work and putting up with it. I talked with Bill Chrysler, and he thinks it's a great opportunity for him over there too. He says, I'm not there, he says, but he says he's 100% behind you all the way. So
And Bill's going to help with some of the sound engineering stuff, so we'll get him to help make sure that that's as minimized as possible to affect the locals.
He's the guy to ask.
Yeah.
If you know anything about music and about sound, that's the guy you want to talk to, and he's very good at it. So thank you so much.
And I have to say, the foot traffic on the east side has been amazing since we've been open. We've noticed a huge increase over the last year, and even Kevin himself at City Farmer has mentioned to us multiple times where people now sitting on our patio space have said, I've never noticed that place before. And now they go over there and they purchase things from him. He's like, I was just sitting across the street of Berserk, and now now they end up in his shop and they're buying flowers or plants or fertilizer.
Absolutely.
There, the foot traffic and the bike traffic over there has increased. I don't know how much, but it's gotten so much more. And the RV park on the corner has helped a ton. And it's been phenomenal for us in the last year.
There's the key, right? And that's, I mean, you've brought a great business to the east side of town, and you've done well. But then when you have events, and we see it in downtown, and we see it, and it matters for the east side of town as well. When you have events, you're bringing even more people. They can see that there's other businesses, even if they're not open at the time. They go, oh, I didn't know that was there. I'll check that out, or what is that across the street, or what is that? So that does bring, economic benefit. So I think you've thought through your event very well. You've been, I think you've done well in engaging and connecting with your neighbors to try to lessen the impact that may come. So I support your requests.
And it was nice to meet with you and your wife Saturday morning and kind of get an overview of everything and how you were planning it. And as Ryan has said, it looked like you had it pretty well thought out then, and it sounds like it's even better now.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your willingness to work with the neighborhood and do your music from 3 to 9. See how that works out, and I have no problem with your event from 2 to 11. I think it'll be great, so good luck.
All right, well, I guess I would affirm that. I think that appreciate your willingness to make these adjustments and to accommodate your neighbors and at least listen to them so that you understand what's going on. And I think that what your business has done for the east end of Washington has been phenomenal. I think that it makes that little business district and that whole neighborhood really more robust, more exciting, more things happening. And I don't think it's out of place in the neighborhood. I think that it works out well. It's not huge. It draws a loyal following. I think it draws a lot of local people. So I appreciate what you're doing there, and I think that the celebration is entirely appropriate. And I think that with the accommodations you've made, the adjustments you've made, the contacts you made with your neighbors, it's going to work out well. So I appreciate that. Anything else? Are we ready to vote?
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. All right, that concludes our business for this agenda, which brings us to our report by City Council. Who would like to go first? Anyone?
Sure, I'll go. Might just as well. Let's see. I want to say thank you for all the music this year we had in Grand Haven. It was unbelievable. WAWL had Bolt Park, which had great attendance out there, which was really nice. We had WGHN had a few concerts in the park, and also we had a good concert on Friday night. Free concerts put on the summer concert series, which was put on by let's see, 7 Steps Up, Third Coast Recording Company, and Encore AV, which brought in acts from all over the United States to come in here and play, which was really good. I want to say thank you to Michelle and Gary Hanks, Bill Chrysler, and all of them that were down there. I attended every one of them. It was very good. The last one was Friday night with Seth Gleer, which was fantastic. But then again, like I say, WAWL had some great, I did not even know that a State Farm agent could actually sing. I thought he was just an ad, but no, it was really good. So I enjoyed I like music, and music is good for you, so it was a great summer, and too bad it had to come to an end. Also, I love the flags around the Central Park. If you guys didn't notice, the Hispanic fiesta is going on, and they got their flags around Central Park and at the fountain there. It's so beautiful. I gotta say thank you. It's going on for the whole week here, so enjoy yourself. It's a lot of different things going on for the fiesta, so I want to say that's about all.
All right, thanks, Mike.
I can go.
Oh, one more thing. Ashley, you weren't here at the last meeting, so I want to say thank you so much for the bridge walk. I mean, you were sick, and I just want to pass it on to you for putting the whole organization together, having all those volunteers and volunteering your time. You don't need to do this, but you did. So thank you so very much. Having your parents come down and work it. I mean, come on, how many people? My kids try to get me to come work some of the things, but but it's different. But yeah, so thank you so very much, Ashley, for all your hard work on that. I didn't get a chance to say it because you weren't here the last time, but I'm going to definitely say it today.
Thank you.
Now I'm done.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and a good point too about all the music that we've had around town. So it's kind of crazy that summer's kind of coming to an end, and here's the fall. But here we are, right? Time keeps ticking. So I attended the September 11th ceremony. Michigan Municipal League, Municipal Services Committee. We had a meeting last Friday to kind of discuss some bills that were coming up related to public safety and elections. Some of them are a little interesting, I'll put it nicely. Some are maybe spot on. So, but that's how the process goes. Thank you, Pat, for your responsiveness this past really week. I swear, I think I've sent more emails to you this past week than I have in at least quite some time, and you've been right on it. I appreciate that. A number of folks have brought up, a need. This came from our high school youth, but our area industry and businesses, when we met with them, really mentioned the need to have some kind of a sustainability plan. And I think they're right. I think our staff has their hands full, big time right now with our current year goals. But as we look towards goal setting here in a couple months, I at least will be, proposing that we consider making a sustainability plan for the entire city that incorporates the BLP, city council, staff, community members, industry, businesses, youth, a good diverse committee. So I think that's a worthy goal. It's going to be a big project and take a while to put something like that together. And so I think we have some current goals we're working on, and our staff's really busy with what they currently have going on. But I think it's a worthy goal that I'll be proposing in a couple months, and I hope my fellow council members will join me in supporting that. Pat, I did have I just came across this today, and I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. I had forgotten about that a little bit. When we were going through budget time, the budget had mentioned that, you'd kind of changed some things. There used to be kind of like individual department reports in there. We took them out and said that, we were going to get maybe an annual report in late August to measure our progress and adjust course, and get kind of a complete picture at the end of the summer, to give council and the public a minute to consider last year's accomplishments and frame the issues in preparation for the annual audit. And I think the audit's going on currently, but I'm wondering if that presentation is something that's maybe still planned. Because obviously tonight we discussed budgets and future forecasting, and maybe, that presentation may be beneficial or helpful for all of us. So, not sure if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, it's on the to-do list
Okay.
for everybody. It's a bit of work, and we did talk about that at budget time, and if you'd like to get that going, I'll have to get after that.
I think it would just be good for us and the future, just to know where we're truly at, what's accurate. So, thank you. That's all I have.
All right, thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Ashley for the bridge walk as well. I attended it with my wife, and it was a great walk, plenty of people there, lots of prizes for people at the end to, have a chance to get. So it was great all around, great weather, couldn't hardly beat it. The music was great all around town, WAWL in Bolt Park, and out in Potawatomi Park for a few times was great. Downtown and Waterfront Stadium was great. We have some music coming up with the Heritage Festival. There's going to be some stuff coming up for that will be great to attend. That's going on all week. The Chow Down in Centertown on October 16th, they're going to have some various bands there as well, located by all the food trucks, so that should be plenty of opportunity for people to come out and enjoy some of that as well also. I also attended several meetings, Planning Commission, BLP, and the Historic District Commission. Many of you probably have noticed that they are planning for an open house at the diesel plant to be held Wednesday and Thursday, October 6th and 7th from 3 to 6 p.m. It'll be a great opportunity and an interesting tour for those who have been wondering what is actually in the building that we have all driven by but never really been inside of. So I urge everyone to take advantage of coming out and wandering around through there when they're having their tours and check out what is in there, because you walk in and it's amazing if you've never been in it. So yeah, stop in, check it out.
And maybe take a generator home with you.
Take a generator home with you.
They are large. Danny.
I guess, and I think Mike said it well, Ashley, that you go the extra mile, and I think we all here appreciate that, so thank you. I remember, back in the 89-90 budget, we were talking about, what our budget looks like now. But back then, the city had to borrow money because they were broke. And that was really a financial hardship. I mean, they had to go out really and borrow money to keep us sustained, to keep our wages paid for our employees, and it was really a bad time, and it took a little while to get out of that hole. Back then, the auditors, when Darrell Tamman was on, and I forget who else, but anyways, when that happened, the auditors recommended that we should always keep an 11% fund balance. So ever since I've been here, I believe we've had a lot more than 11%. So we built that fund balance up, and then back when I got in council, we had the Grand Landing financial hardship that we had with Grand Landing, and we had to take care of that. So we agreed as a council that we should have a fund balance of 22%. Well, we overdid that, and we got it from the 30%, which is, I don't think we should have been there, and I argued that a long time, and anyways. But we've always been over what the auditors always said we should be is 11%. Financially, Grand Haven's in great shape. If you look at on our website, grandhaven.org, you'll see that we have a financial statement on there from the state that says they rate us from 0 to 10, and we've always been, since I've been on council, either 0 or 1, and this year we're rated at a 1, with 10 being the worst and 0 being the best. And so, this whole thing about the city budget is way out of whack, I think. Sure, we took it down from 31%, which we never should have been anyways, to 16%. And I have a friend, is a college professor that taught economics at Grand Valley for schools administration. He taught superintendents. In fact, he taught some of the superintendents that were in Grand Haven. And when I told him what our fund balance was, he always taught that it should never be above 15%. And I met with him at coffee again today. I see him a lot, and we talk once about, but a 31% fund balance is not something we should have. And we did keep an extra fund balance because of Grand Landing, and I think that was a good thing to do. We had a fund there in case something turned around. We had some funds to take care of that. So yeah, our fund balance went from 31 to 16%, and And some of that money went into the public improvement fund, and we still have plenty of funds there. So our budget's not overstretched by a long shot, and our budget's actually in good financial shape. And when we talk about the pension system, our pension system is $31 million in the red. Half of our pension system is paid for 50% by employees, 50% by the city. So if you consider that, we may be $31 million in debt, but our employees are also responsible for half of that. Like it or not, that's the way it is, because they pay half of their pension system, and that goes in. And then the pension system wouldn't be quite so bad either, but the MERS, when Snyder was in there, they kind of refigured the system, and they squeezed it down some, and that made it even worse yet. So, but anyways, and if you look at and I know we're going to have a work session on it, so I'm glad we are, because I think this needs to be talked out and to find out exactly where we're at with it. So, financially, I think the city of Grand Haven is in great financial shape. I think we're not in the hole as some people say we are. And to point their finger at the city council and say that we haven't done our job, or the administration say they haven't done their job, I think is completely false. And I think it has I don't think there's any basis for it. So that's my opinion. And like I said, I worked for the city when the city had to borrow money to keep their employees' payroll going. So I know what that's like. And I also know what the auditors came back with back when we had that financial trouble, that we should keep the 11% fund balance. So to be criticized for our fund balance being down from 31 to 16%, I don't think it's a bad place to be, and I think 16% is a great place to be. So I think if people really look at where we're at and where we've been, I think the city of Grand Haven is in great financial shape.
Okay, thanks, Danny. And Danny was alluding to an item on the city's website called Grand Haven Fiscal Condition, which is a tab you can open. It's Munitrix, if I'm saying that correctly, database, which has objective information on the city's fiscal condition. I think it's very interesting reading, and I would encourage everyone to take a look at that. And I appreciate everybody's sentiments about how nice it was to have a summer this year. I mean, last year we kind of got robbed on that, and this year a lot of things happened. It was a fun summer, very fulfilling. It was kind of the Grand Haven we've been dreaming about for a year. And so I'm glad that was able to happen. I enjoyed the Parade of Flags this past Sunday when we walked up Washington Street, when the Fiesta participants walked up Washington Street with the flags, mounted them in Central Park. I think it's very festive, and I'm looking forward to a week of interesting activities, particularly next Saturday. So lots still going on, and as some of the other comments have been made, there's things going on this fall. So stay tuned. This is still a great place to be, and a lot of interesting stuff. So that's pretty much all I've got for my comments. And thank you, Ashley, again for the bridge walk. Somehow it got listed as the mayor's bridge walk, which it never has been, but I think it was Ashley's bridge walk. So from this point on, that's how we'll think of it. So thank you. So that brings us to city manager's report.
Thank you, Your Honor, and the couple things I wanted to cover, I guess mostly talking about the conference this week in Grand Rapids that several of you are attending. We typically would have a trip further away than Grand Rapids. When it's in Grand Rapids, it's often more members are going to those sessions that they want to go to, and they drive over and go and come back. There's not a too much of a concerted effort, but we can carpool. Just this evening, I had my Wednesday noon meeting get canceled, so if we'd like to carpool, we could leave City Hall here at noon. The first general session starts at 1 o'clock. So for those of you that would like to carpool, if we'd like to leave here at noon, be back here about 4:30. You know, I think Bob's got to stay for the MML business meeting because he's your voting delegate, and that's an exciting time. If you'd like to stay for that, you can ride back in Bob's van, but
I can vote yes now, is that okay? Pretty much what it amounts to.
I've been to one of those.
so we should be back here by 4:30. There's a Harbor Transit meeting at 5:30, I think, in the village. Or no, it's at 4:30. So we'll have to make good time coming back. And then Thursday, we can leave here about 7:30 a.m. We'd get back here about 6:30 p.m. And I'll get an email out and ask for some responses. So we'll make a long day of it Thursday, and then Friday we'll be on our own again because I've got some various commitments that day. So that's all I really needed to cover, and I appreciate all of the activity that's going on. It's not slowing down. There's things going on every weekend, and I think it's going to carry over into the winter. There's a lot of enthusiasm for all these special events, and thank you for your patience as we work through to try to get the best outcomes. And I will be presenting a block party policy. I think that's overdue to come up with a plan to do a better job. We did send out letters to everybody as directed, so everybody would have gotten notice. And tonight we did have a neighbor show up, and they did get a letter, and I understand gave letters to all their tenants. So everybody knows about it down there, and I think it'll be a very fun event. I kind of like the way Tyler put it, that it's a little festival for the east side. They don't have a lot of events over there, and every now and then something kind of comes along. So this is that thing for 2021, and I'm sure it'll be well received. And Tyler already left, but I'd like to suggest to him is that if he's got a band, maybe they just do acoustic only after 9 o'clock. Just unplug the amps and play your acoustic guitar, and it's still nice entertainment. Maybe they can get an accordion. It's a polka fest. Let's do something along those lines. So we'll talk to them and try to keep it down and have a great event so that they can do it every year and maybe build a fun festival for the east side. That's all I have, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Pat.
I think he needs a tuba.
A tuba?
Yeah, for Oktoberfest, gotta have a tuba with it.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds right. Bring your tuba.
Okay, we'll make that suggestion. That brings us to our second call to the audience. This is your second opportunity. At this time, members of the audience may address council on any item, whether on the agenda or not. Those addressing council are asked to provide their name and address. Will be limited to 3 minutes of speaking time. Council will hear all comments for future consideration, but will not have a response at this time.
Mayor Manetza and everybody, thank you very much for a long meeting. It's you seem to have your share these days. I just wanted to thank Pat and Jen Holland for a new policy that the city has, which is for those of us that are somewhat immune compromised for meetings, we have the ability to participate remotely, and I thank Pat for developing that policy. I also want to comment briefly on the snowmelt system. My understanding is that last spring, a number of the retailers and property owners downtown requested that you all form a special committee to take a look at the whole issue of snowmelt. There's the $1 million liability. I don't quite understand why it's a $1 million liability, but you apparently have that issue back and forth between you and the BLP. You have the whole issue of how the thing is going to be regulated. Right now, there are 2 policy-setting elected boards that are regulating the BLP. You're one, the BLP is another. There probably should be one, and since you guys are paying 25% of it, makes some sense that you have a little bit more say. I would just suggest that it may make some sense to bring in the DDA, maybe the community foundation people, maybe a couple people from industry, a couple of you. Take a look at this whole thing, and instead of what's going on, which is it's like Chicken Little with the sky falling, nobody's really focusing in on it. Get a group of people, give them 2 months, come up with a solution, and then figure out where the money's going to come from. And I think there'd be money in the community that would help pay for the thing one way or another. And it's just a suggestion, and I thank you all very much for your efforts. I think you should. I'm on the Ottawa County Elected Officials Compensation Commission. I'm actually the chairman of it. And I think your compensation commission should like quadruple your pay. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that, Field.
Yeah, normally we don't comment, but thank you, Field.
Hello, Jim Hagan here, 400 Lake. Pat was asking for a little bit of input from the taxpayer on some of those proposals, and I just wanted to say that I really support Ryan and Mike in questioning why we would be investing so much money on the marina when it's losing money. I heard things said like, oh, we're going to maybe have to back out of that, or something along, shut down, in the future. I don't, why can't we talk things like, let's keep what we have, let's repair what we have. It's a good marina. It doesn't need a huge amount of investment. If people really feel that gigantic boats are needed, why instead of doing all the slips, why don't we just test it out? Why don't we do a few of the slips? Why don't we survey the other marinas and see what the distribution of sizes of boats are? Is there even the opportunity? We do a survey of people and they say, oh yeah, the slips are too small. Well, okay, that's nice. That's somebody's opinion. Let's get some facts involved in this. One thing we do not need is we do not need to take out more bonds, which eventually translate into more taxes. So I would encourage the council, the mayor, the city administration to look at keeping what we have, fixing it up, keeping it nice. We don't always have to expand. Bigger is not always better. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? They're shaking their heads out there. All right, if no one else would care to address council at this time, we will close the second call to the audience. Unless there's any other business anyone would like to throw out there, I think it's time to adjourn. So, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for coming.